Hello and welcome to the Actual Tech Media Megacast, enhancing data protection, disaster recovery as a service, and disaster recovery capabilities. This event is brought to you by Zerto, Rubrik, Atempo, Nutanix, Veeam, Druva, Scale Computing, and Unitrends. Thank you so much for joining us. We've got an awesome event lined up for you today, as we always do on the Megacast. We at Actual Tech Media created the Megacast and EcoCast event series to help educate IT professionals such as yourselves about the latest and greatest in enterprise technology to help you do it conveniently and easily and safely all in one place from the comfort of your home or office to get all your questions answered and to help you learn a lot about some really innovative technologies and, hey, maybe win some awesome prizes at the same time. My name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'll be serving as your moderator. We at Actual Tech Media are all former IT professionals ourselves. We know how tough it can be in the world of technology out there, and we want to help you to get your technology challenges solved here on this event. That's our hope. That's our goal. We encourage your questions. And speaking of that, thank you so much for all the hello and good morning, good afternoon messages from across the United States and around the world. I see so many names out there, too many to name, but thank you each and every one of you for joining us on the Megacast. We encourage your questions. Of course, we'll be doing dedicated Q&A sessions with each of our expert presenters after each of the sessions on the Megacast today. So, thank you for the good morning messages, but we also want your technical questions about the solutions you'll be learning about on the Megacast. I'll also have a few poll questions for you out there in the audience, and I'll be sharing the results of the polls with you. We also have some awesome prizes. I'll talk about the requirements to win those and what we'll be giving away here in just a moment. But first, I also want to point out that we want this to be a social event. I'll be monitoring Twitter throughout the event. If you tweet directly from your audience console there using the Twitter icon, it's actually on the right-hand side of this console. The hashtag for today's event, ATM Megacast, will be automatically appended. The first time you do that, it will prompt you for your Twitter authorization, as any Twitter application does. And then after that, you can tweet directly there from the console, and the hashtag is automatically appended. You can also access all the Actual Tech Media social channels on the top right-hand side of your audience console: YouTube, Facebook, or YouTube, Twitter, and LinkedIn. We also have a number of resources, 7 to be exact, there in your audience console from Zerto, Rubrik, Atempo, Nutanix, Veeam, Druva, Scale Computing, and Unitrends, special links, ebooks, solution briefs, white papers. Make sure that you check out those resources before you go. The prizes on the Megacast are some Apple M1 MacBook Airs. I wish I could get my hands on one of these, but 5 of you on the live event today will be going home or having delivered one of these Apple M1 MacBook Airs, awesome new machines from Apple, as well as $500 Amazon gift cards every 30 minutes. That's after each of the 7 sessions on the Megacast today. You must be live in attendance to qualify. I'll be announcing the winners verbally here on the event, so make sure that you stay tuned for those prize drawings. We also have our best question prize that we started here new in 2021 for your best question for a $50 Amazon gift card per session. So there's 7 sessions on the event today, so that's 7 more Amazon $50 gift cards. We will contact the prize winners of these after the event, after we've had a chance to review all the questions and select what we think to be the best question for each of the sessions on the event. Winners, of course, must also meet the Actual Tech Media prize policy, which you can find there in your handouts tab. All winners have the option to make a donation to our selected charities that I'll mention here in just a moment. Prize winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media. You can follow Actual Tech Media on Twitter and me as well, David M. Davis. Again, the hashtag is ATM Megacast. Our selected charities that we have made thousands of dollars in donations donations to across the years are on the screen. If you win a prize and you'd like to help someone less fortunate, we would love to help you do that. We've done that in partnership with the Gorilla Guide Book Club, where you can download free educational IT books. You'll find a link to that there in your handouts tab. It's gorilla.guide. Make sure that you check out those books. Again, don't forget to subscribe to all the Actual Tech Media social channels, YouTube, Facebook, the 10 on Tech podcast, and our LinkedIn channel, which is our most active channel. So make sure that you follow us and check us out there. I also want to mention that we post all of our recorded events on our YouTube channel. So I encourage you to follow us on YouTube as well to get recordings of all the events that happen at Actual Tech Media. Now, before we do some polls and I introduce you to our first presenter, there's something here I want to talk about for just a moment. This is a new program that we're doing here at Actual Tech Media. And how this happened, how this was created, is that IT vendors approach us all the time, and they want to know what we think about their technology pitches, their demos, their marketing messages, their websites. But really, it's not our opinion that matters as much as it's your opinion, you as an IT professional, and that's truly who they want to hear from. So we can't think of a better way to get them feedback that they need than to engage you, our fantastic Actual Tech Media audience, to help us out. So what we're doing here is we're building a team of established IT professionals like you to provide respectful but honest and candid feedback to vendors on their technology demos and pitches like the ones you'll hear on the event today. So if you'd like to become a reviewer and let these companies know if they're hitting the mark with their marketing messages and their products and features and capabilities, then we encourage you to click on the link right there in the slides window. The same link is also in the handouts tab at the very top. It says Actual Tech Media IT Reviewer Program Application, and fill out this short survey, which is an application to join the program. And if you're accepted into the program, as a thank you for your time in providing vendors feedback, we'll be sharing a $50 Amazon gift card each time that you participate in a feedback round. So not just for filling out the survey, that's kind of a short application, but if once you're in the program, then this is how we compensate you for your time with Amazon gift cards. So if you're interested, tell us a little bit about yourself by clicking on the link there in the survey, in the slide to the survey. It says apply here, or in the handouts tab. And we hope that this is a fun way to share your expertise, your opinions, and also earn some gift cards in the process. So thank you in advance. So now I'd like to set the stage here for today's topic of enhancing data protection and disaster recovery capabilities. Now, before we jump into a few poll questions and I introduce you to our first presenter on the Megacast, I ask you to stop for a moment, think about your disaster recovery plan. What does it look like today? If you had an earthquake, a tornado, a fire, a flood, whatever it might be, right now, today, I hope it doesn't happen, but if you did, what would your disaster recovery plan look like? Would it work? Are you confident of it? When's the last time you tested the plan? When's the last time you tested your backups? And not just recovering an individual file or an individual virtual machine or an individual database, but what about if you needed to recover everything? These ransomware attacks that are happening, these companies have to do mass restores. And in many cases, while they have their data backed up and they can restore it, they haven't ever tested a mass restore. And the time that it takes to perform a mass restore, unfortunately, they discover in some cases is weeks or a month. And then unfortunately, they end up having to pay the ransom. So take a moment and think about your disaster recovery plan, because it's a scary time for you and your company's data. We all have massively growing data sets. Our data is being distributed across mobile, across software as a service applications, across multiple data centers, public clouds, laptops. Our data is everywhere. It's not just in one place in the data center anymore that you can walk in there and put a hand on. Your company's data is everywhere, and it's your job to protect it.
Unfortunately, it's being attacked and sold. And even if you can recover your data after a ransomware attack, in many cases, companies are being blackmailed. And even employee personal data is being sold and employees are being blackmailed. So it's a scary time for us in IT. So not only do you need data protection and disaster recovery, you also need strong security. Now, thankfully, cloud is a great innovation that has helped us to make this easier than it used to be in the past. With utility-based pricing models, we might only have to pay to store our data each month, and then an additional charge when we need to perform testing or actually spin up our DR site in the cloud. Cloud offers infinite scalability for disaster recovery. It's elastic. You can spin it up, bring it back down. It's DR on demand, push button DR in many cases. There are pre-built cloud DR solutions and they can be automated. I really like how disaster recovery as a service can make disaster recovery easier. But whether or not you choose to use cloud for your data protection and DR, you need to make sure that you have a solution for backup and recovery that's high performance, that can scale up to the size of your data set, because the data just never seems to stop scaling. Make sure that it's affordable for your company, that you can test it easily, and that it's going to make your job easier when it comes to disaster recovery. And finally, don't forget solid support. Make sure that the support is going to be there when you need it. And with all that in mind, I'm excited to hear from some of the most innovative technology companies in the world today to learn about how they can help you in the real world to enhance your data protection and disaster recovery capabilities. Now, before I introduce you to our first presenter, I've got a few poll questions for you.
All right, I just brought up our first poll question. The question on the screen is, how confident are you that your current data protection or disaster recovery solution will meet the needs of the business now and in the future? I'll leave this up here for a moment, allow everyone to respond to that, and then I'll share the results, and you can kind of see how you stack up with your peers. All right, thank you for all the responses. Thank you for all the excellent comments and feedback there. If you're having any trouble with the poll, I see one or two people mentioned that. Try a refresh on your web browser. Also, make sure you're using Chrome or Firefox. Those are the recommended web browsers. Great feedback here coming in the questions panel. Always ensure you test your backups. I totally agree. Couldn't agree more. That's why I also love these automated testing features. You'll learn about some of those on the event today. So thank you everyone who responded to this one. And let me just share the results. So on my side here, it says 57% say they're somewhat confident, but need new features and capabilities. 6% said they're not confident at all. 4% have no solution in place whatsoever. 31% are confident. Kudos to you. I mean, if we add up the folks out there that are somewhat confident, not confident, and have no solution in place, that means 67% roughly of you out there are, looking or needing disaster recovery enhancements and features, and maybe even a solution at all. So thank you for sharing that. Next and final question before I introduce you to our first presenter, and that is, what's your time frame for adding new or updating existing data protection and DR solutions at your company? 67% of you out there are looking for something. So, kind of what's your time frame to get something done? All right, thank you to everyone who responded there to the poll. We do appreciate that. It's now time to kick off our Megacast. I'm excited to introduce you to our first presenter. Welcome, Mr. Andy Fernandez, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Zerto. Andy, great to have you. Take it away.
I'm Senior Product Marketing Manager here at Zerto Software, and welcome you to today's session, which is really focused on backup, disaster recovery, data protection, and disaster recovery as a service. We're going to talk about it as Zerto's approach regarding these use cases via continuous data protection. So if you have any questions, please add them to the chat. If not, we'll try to answer all of your questions towards the end. Also, take a look at any of the resources that we provide during the session within the link in the chat. With that, let's take a look at our agenda. So in regards to today's agenda, we're going to do a quick introduction. We're going to take a look at some of the challenges that we're seeing within data protection and disaster recovery. Whether you are doing it yourself or you're looking to use a service provider, these challenges are still the same. From there, we're going to take a look at how Zerto does things differently, how Zerto's continuous data protection is able to provide a simple experience with the best performance and also available for whatever cloud destination or on-premises strategy that you're looking for. After that, we're going to take a look at a couple of customer examples to validate this as well. But before we do any of that, let's really take an understanding of what an IT organization has to do today. So if you're an IT or infrastructure and operations organizations today, regardless of whether you have disparate disaster recovery and backup teams, you still have common requirements as an organization that you have to perform. And this comes from a reactive perspective, right? You have to be able to restore a file locally, meaning if somebody deletes a file, it's corrupted, or even a minor ransomware attack specific to a folder, you have to be able to restore this effectively without an impact to production and get this as quick as possible to whoever is requiring this information. But you also are required to retain data for certain periods, especially if you're within healthcare, financial services organizations, or even other types of governmental agencies as well. You need to be able to host, retain data for a long period of time, but also be able to recover said data as well. And that's more of the backup experience, right? Both restoring locally and being able to retain data long term. But also there's a DR component. That same organization, you're responsible for performing a failover if there's a natural disaster. And not just your traditional natural disasters that you see with hurricanes, tornadoes, fires, but also planned disasters as well. Being able to preemptively move data somewhere else, or even worst case scenario, have to deal with a large scale ransomware attack. We're seeing ransomware kind of toe the line between a backup and a disaster recovery scenario, depending on what happens. So these are common things that have to be done, and we've already talked about ransomware, but there's another one too from a plan perspective. This same organization, usually your same department, is also tasked to migrate to the cloud, whether it's actually moving your protected DR or backup workloads to the cloud or something entirely different. Whether you're facing a merger or an acquisition or just a cloud initiative, you have to have the capabilities to do so. So IT organizations are aware of this, and they have to find the right tool set to be able to unlock these capabilities. But with that comes a lot of complexity. If you think about many organizations, most of them start on premises. You have a primary data center, and you realize that you need to be able to fail over to another warm site. So you build a secondary data center. This is the site where you're able to fail over all your applications if something happens to fulfill a DR scenario. Usually you're using a tool like Recovery Point, and you require homogeneous storage to be able to do so. So you have kind of fulfilled at a very basic level what you need for DR. But then you also realize you need a little bit more sophisticated orchestration and automation. So you have to bring in another tool. Let's use SRM, or Site Recovery Manager, as an example as well. Now you're kind of dealing with two tools kind of perform the same activity within the same business unit. After that, you're also expected to still perform your local restores of files, folders, and VMs, but also from a compliance perspective. So you need backup as well. And then, you've had all this built on premises, and you've now received the cloud mandate to be able to move to the cloud. Whether you have to move your DR to the cloud or you have to move your backup to the cloud, you then have to now acquire another tool in order to do so. So within this same space, to accomplish the core capabilities of what we've talked about, you need a DR tool, you need an orchestration tool, backup tool, and something to be able to migrate, because you want the best performance for each one. So now you're managing multiple UIs, completely different training and professional services requirements. You're spending a lot of time and resources on not just the initial installation and configuration, but just managing it, managing the upgrade process. This takes a lot of time, a lot of people, and a lot of effort for something that's more focused on a reactive approach than anything really focused on building your business. And that's on the technical side. Let's not even get into what are the ramifications from a licensing and pricing perspective, just on managing disparate backup and DR tools, let alone another tool for orchestration, let alone another tool for data migrations as well. This presents a lot of complexities, a lot of wasted time, and also a lot of lack of structure and continuity from a performance perspective as well. So how does Zerto do it differently? Well, we focus on all of these use cases being able to be performed from one user interface and one specific action. Let's take a look at that. So what I've done here is kind of gift the Zerto UI, specifically a failover, to show the simplicity of what you can accomplish within a few clicks. And if you think about what you thought about Zerto 10 years ago to what it is today, there's a lot that you can perform. Within the same Zerto user interface, a specific just software-only approach, you're able to perform what you would require from a backup perspective. You can restore files and folders instantly without an impact to production. You can recover a VM or an application from long-term storage as well, whether it's a secondary site on premises or in the public cloud. You can perform a complete failover, as you're seeing here on the screen, and you're able to also migrate on premises or to the cloud. So within one interface, one experience, one licensing structure, you're able to perform all these things that required a full, what I would call, data protection stack. And that's what's different about Zerto, that you're getting the best performance and you're not making any sacrifices on specific use cases. And what I mean by that is we see a lot of organizations using their backup software to perform DR. But we know that's just not feasible to be able to use backup, because backup is only effective in the scenarios where you're experiencing data loss. You can't have planned operations when you're doing backup. You can't effectively move your data. And we're seeing our customers experience that and start to consolidate Zerto and use Zerto explicitly for both backup and DR. And the reason that is I'll show you on the following slide. Zerto, it gives you the ability to do things for both the unplanned aspect of your business, but also for the planned side. For the unplanned, both DR and backup, you're able to recover from ransomware. You're able to do it in performance that is unmatched and simplicity that is unmatched as well. You're able to restore files, folders, and VMs. You can recover from long-term retention, right? That cost-effective storage. You can fail over to another site in the case of a outage or some type of malfunctioning with your hardware, or you could even do it in the usual case of natural disasters. That's just the unplanned side. But what about the planned side of the business, specifically the one that usually is tied to actual revenue? Well, with Zerto, you're able to simply, in a simple manner, migrate to the public cloud, or you can do it to another data center. You can do it to a service provider. Let's say that you realize that maybe from a DRaaS perspective, you need the capabilities and the expertise of the service provider. With Zerto, you can simply move to them and experience the value of Zerto's technology, coupled with the efficiency, the service catalog that a service provider can provide you as well. But also preemptive failovers, right? Let's say that you know a hurricane is coming within 1 or 2 days. Why not fail over quickly before any type of risk happens and you're able to do so? You can't do that with backup. So that's what we pride ourselves at Zerto with, being able to deliver one experience for all unplanned and planned activities, regardless of the use case, right? Data protection and disaster recovery. But how does it actually work? What gives us the best performance? What gives us the best simplicity when it comes to executing on these specific capabilities? Well, at the core of continuous data protection is our near synchronous replication. What differs Zerto from the rest is the fact that we're not tied to array-based storage replication. This is replication that sits at the hypervisor level. What you're doing is essentially using change block tracking to observe and write every single change that happens within your virtualized applications. So you're able to essentially create recovery checkpoints every 5 seconds. So instead of waiting, a couple of hours in between copy checkpoints, you're able to just use Zerto's replication to do so. More importantly, the reason you're able to do this with such granularity is that there is no impact on your production environment. So whether you're looking at a specific secondary site that you're replicating to, or something like Azure, just because you recognize the value of using the cloud as a warm site, you're able to do it. So what this means at the end of the day, Zerto's replication gives you RPOs of seconds for DR and for backup as well. And that's a crucial aspect to consider as well. But it's not just about the replication. You need a mechanism to be able to recover this data as well. And with that, this is where the Zerto Journal comes in. The Zerto Journal is the mechanism that observes these changes, manages the replication, and then it gives you the user interface to be able to select those checkpoints pretty easily. Think about it. You're creating thousands and thousands of checkpoints a day instead of 2 to 3 points where you can restore and perform a backup restore. So the Zerto Journal simplifies this, where you can select even just an application and all of the VMs that belong to that application and consistently recover them. This is just a quick UI of what that looks like. You're simply able to select the date, select the timestamp with 5 seconds apart, and then be able to recover or restore without any impact to production environments. And this is an extremely crucial aspect to understand, because coupled with both the replication and the journaling technology, there is no backup provider or no backup service that can deliver this for both DR and backup. And what I mean by that is, if you just take a look at your traditional day, because of what snapshots do to your environment and the impact they put on production and how much storage they consume, you're really usually performing a nightly or daily backup just to make sure that you have something to recover from. But let's say you're hit with ransomware and everything else, your threat detection works out perfectly, and you understand the exact point in time in which you can recover an application. Well, even if everything's inherently working, assuming your backup restore even works, you're still facing a couple of hours of data loss at minimum. With Zerto, it's just a couple of seconds. We have multiple customer success stories where they were attacked with ransomware, the data was encrypted, and they were able to simply recover. So this shows you the RPO superiority of what Zerto can deliver for both backup and DR compared to the rest of the industry. But what about RTOs? That's a critical component as well. If you think about the nature of your enterprise applications, right, there's a lot of dependencies there from a multi-VM perspective. You have sometimes almost a dozen or more VMs that belong to a specific application. When you are copying this or performing a traditional backup job, you use incremental snapshots. And that's fine when you're just trying to back it up, right? That's traditional backup technology. But what happens when you actually have to recover and recover quickly? You then have to do the math and find the common denominator and understand exactly at which checkpoint are all of these VMs at a consistent, specific checkpoint. That's incredibly difficult to do, especially scaling it across multiple applications. But with Zerto, it's completely different. What we do is we treat your applications as one consistent entity, one cohesive unit where you configure what we call a virtual protection group. You designate all of the VMs that belong to that application, put them in the virtual protection group, and then with any incident or move operation, you simply select that application and can recover all the checkpoints at the same exact time. This saves a lot of time on RTO. Sometimes we only focus on RPO, but RTO is extremely important at the enterprise level as well. And then you have another important aspect too is, well, where am I replicating? What is the difference between what I want to do on premise or in the public cloud or with a disaster recovery service provider? Well, let's take a look. Because of our software only nature and the fact that we're agnostic, we allow you to utilize the infrastructure that's best for you. Whether you want to use a traditional public cloud like Microsoft Azure, or you actually want to be able to use VMware on a public cloud like the Azure VMware solution, you can do so. You can do that without any impact on production, without any difference in performance, and utilizing a scale-out architecture as well. But we also know that this session also talks about disaster recovery as a service. We have over 450 service providers that you're able to utilize in order to be able to replicate to them and have them manage your disaster recovery capabilities. And really, Zerto is about flexibility, and it's about giving you consistent performance wherever your infrastructure is, whether you're focused on cost optimization or you're focused on making sure that you can have the SLAs that are right for your business. And that's why you're using a service provider. Zerto's architecture, its software-only approach, the way that we are scaled out, it is completely effective for that. That's why we consider ourselves a true cloud data management and protection platform. And with that, I want to kind of show you kind of exactly all of the use cases that you're able to unlock with the Zerto platform. As we covered in the beginning, we saw all of the planned and unplanned operations you can do with Zerto. Our goal is that it doesn't matter what workload you have, whether you are using virtualization, whether you have SaaS, whether you have containerized applications like Kubernetes, or even all three of them, that you're able to use one platform and experience to deliver disaster recovery, to be able to deliver continuous backup, long-term retention for compliance, the fact that you are able to move this data wherever you want, but also unlock additional use cases like test and development, or even security and compliance. We have strong alliances, and we're able to deliver that experience consistently across all of them. But with that in mind, let's take a look at some customer examples that we've seen that are very successful within this. One of my favorite examples here is Pruitt Health. Pruitt Health had an on-premise site, and they realized they wanted to use Microsoft Azure for their DR operations. So what they did is they switched from on-premises DR with SRM, and they started protecting VMs in Microsoft Azure with Zerto. Of course, they were able to unlock the performance that Zerto promises around RPOs of seconds, RTOs of minutes. But what's very interesting as well is our approach to DR testing helped them reduce the time from days to hours. They were able to improve the efficiency and the reduced man hours spent on near daily maintenance and operations. So it's very clear how easy it is for Zerto to be used, not just to unlock the best performance, but also the simplest experience as well. And this is a DR specific approach, but what about backup? Another excellent success story that we have is Gray County. Gray County has a great quote that I think really exemplifies the value of Zerto in Azure. And it says, government organizations like ours are often stretched thin, and each agency consists of a lot of small businesses, in a sense. Zerto and Azure met all of our very demanding requirements. They just work together seamlessly. And when we talk about those requirements, it's not just about one specific operation, whether planned or unplanned. It's about being able to deliver DR, being able to deliver backup, and being able to do so in a way that reduces TCO, increases performance, and lets your IT organization focus on proactive activities like building the business. I asked and urge that you take a look at these case studies later on, because there's a lot of value to understand from a user's perspective what you can do with Zerto and Azure. Now, with that in mind, I want to leave some links with you and a few other resources as well. And with that, I invite you to experience Zerto really firsthand. There's one thing me sitting here talking about it to you, but the other one is being able to see a real demo, being able to get your hands on the labs, or even perform a TCO calculation to know what would Zerto's impact be to your organization. I'm going to provide all of these links as well within the chat, but take a look at this, and there's one more resource that I'm leaving with you. What I'm doing here are giving you 3 core assets that are really important, and 2 of them are adding a list back. The first one is the Guerrilla Guide to Continuous Backup and Recovery Express Edition. This is an excellent read, especially if you're coming more from a backup perspective and want to know what is the difference between my legacy backup approach using snapshots and what I'm using with Zerto. And the other 2 are more analyst-backed papers that are very interesting, using objective survey data to really understand what are the challenges that organizations are facing today, why can't traditional backup solve for them, and how Zerto is able to deliver significant value there. I'm going to leave all these resource links within the chat as well. And with that, let's move over to some of the questions. So we have some questions here that let's get to answering them. The first one is, do you have a solution for Kubernetes or containerized applications? The answer is yes. We've actually just released at ZertoCon Zerto for Kubernetes, which means disaster recovery and data protection as code. I definitely urge you to take a look at our ZertoCon site, watch our sessions, and even read some of our assets and interesting articles around why we're delivering a very unique approach and how we're bringing continuous data protection to the table for containerized applications. And that also applies to SaaS, meaning Microsoft Office 365, Salesforce, Google Workspace, and a few others as well. Another question that we're getting here is on the analytics side. Does Zerto have analytics? Yes, we have Zerto Analytics, which is actually browser-based, meaning that regardless of where your site is, you have the ability to monitor your data center and your protected VMs from anywhere. Whether it's on your phone or on your desktop or laptop, you're able to do so. And what's interesting about Zerto as well is that these analytics are completely built in. We're not charging you anything else. This comes with the Zerto platform along with everything else. The other questions we usually get as well is, well, what about hypervisors? Well, we work with Hyper-V and vSphere. And we're also, from a virtualization perspective, licensed per VMs as well. That's another question that we seem to be getting a lot. So with that in mind, I'm going to keep answering some of the chat questions, but I want to thank you all for your time and your attention today. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Andy. Really excellent session. We've got, I see over 42 questions there in the queue for Andy. So obviously a lot of interest and excitement around the Zerto solution. I've just brought up a poll question for everyone out there I want to call your attention to on the screen that says, what additional information would you like about the Zerto solution? I know some have asked for, hey, how do I get a demo? How do I try this for myself? What other customers are using this? What's the pricing model? I see all those questions there in the chat. So I encourage you to check the box as well here in the slides window, and that way we can register your interest. So let me leave this up for just a moment here and allow everyone to respond. And I'm actually just going to leave this up while I do our first prize announcements. We do have an Amazon $500 gift card. This is going to Daniel Diaz from California. Congratulations, Daniel Diaz from California. And our first grand prize, who is the winner of an Apple M1 MacBook Air, is Brett Schechter from Nevada. Congratulations, Brett Schechter from Nevada. I'll post the prize winners there in the chat as well. A lot more prizes still to give out and some awesome content coming up. If you haven't answered that poll, I encourage you to do that now, because we are moving on to our next presentation. And now I'm excited to introduce you to our next presenter on today's Megacast. Welcome, Mr. Carl Norwich, GMT lead for App Flows at Rubrik. Carl, are you there?
I am, sir.
Thanks for being on, Carl. Take it away.
All right, great. Yeah, we're starting off great. I'm the GTM, the go-to-market lead for App Flows, and thank you so much for having me on, everyone. It's a pleasure to speak with you today. What we're going to talk about today is a new offering that is coming to market from Rubrik, which is called App Flows, which is our orchestrated disaster recovery solution. For those of you who aren't experienced with Rubrik, though, I wanted to take just a few quick moments to familiarize you with Rubrik as a whole and as a company as we talk about the product that we're integrating into our solution. So Rubrik is about a 5.5-year-old company. I've had the fortunate opportunity to be with the company since the beginning, around employee 47. And in that amount of time, we've done some amazing things. We've just breached about 3,500 customers and have over 2,000 employees. We're what's known as a unicorn in the Valley, which is very flattering. And the company has grown because of these three principles that you see here on the screen, which is automated data protection, which is really where we started out. When we first came to market, the product really disrupted the way that you view backup and recovery and the capabilities that you can expect from the solutions. Second area is rapid recovery from ransomware and disasters. But mainly, if you think about it, ransomware really is the modern disaster. And I'll talk a little bit about how we address that today and how we're going to further lean into that as we go on into the future. And the last part of this is the principal foundation of our system and our software stack is that we wrote our own file system. We didn't reuse anything that was out in the marketplace. And the reason that we did that is we understood that backups are the vault. They are your safety line, and they cannot be compromised under any circumstances. So we boast a solution that is immutable by design and from its birth. So let's double-click a little bit more on these areas. So first of all, let's just look at how legacy backup was done traditionally and how it may be done in your environment today. When you look at those solutions, it was more complex, candidly, than I ever thought it would be. My background was primary storage before I joined Rubrik, so I understood that backup was there, but operationally, I didn't understand how many parts and pieces were there that you had to manage. And if you think about it, not only do you have to manage them operationally, you have to create processes. You have to make purchasing decisions, best-of-breed decisions, and it was really challenging. And it created a lot of overhead for something as simplistic as take my data from a workload, store it somewhere safe, let me know that you've got it, and index it and let me know what kind of access I can have to it. And with Rubrik, what we created was what we call a converged backup solution. It's a single piece of software which encapsulates every bullet that you see there. The backup software, of course, the backup servers, the proxies. There's no necessity for media servers or any of these types of things. This one single piece of software is not only scalable inherently, meaning you can buy based on what your business needs today, not what you think you'll need 3 years from now, but operationally, we've converged up to 9 different areas and points of management into one solution. And that's really how we've gotten the acceleration in the customer base that we've amassed. A second area is managing the jobs themselves, right? If you think about RTOs and RPOs and the backup jobs and the failures and things like that, what we understood was not only do we want to make this solution and attack backup and make it more simple operationally, but we also needed to deliver a unique value to the business itself. And in that area, what we're able to do is not only deliver aggressive RTOs in the neighborhood of 1 minute. If you think about how powerful that is, think about an application going down. You can go into the Rubrik solution, bring it online in what we call a live mount, have it online in a minute, regardless of how large the workload is. But we also have the capability of meeting RPOs as low as 1 second, leveraging CDP technology, which again, part of that single software stack I mentioned a moment ago. And lastly, all these things are great, but if I gave you a price tag that wasn't affordable, I mean, what's the point, right? We all have to work under a budget. It's really incumbent upon all of us to be good stewards of the funds that are provided to us by the business. And if you think back to what I put on the first bullet, you had to manage renewals and best pricing on servers, software, data storage, archival, and all these different areas. And by consolidating all of these things and eliminating the complexity, you can anticipate saving in the neighborhood of 30 to 50% on your total cost of the solution over a 3-year period. So these 3 areas, to give you the precursor to what Rubrik was, this is where we've had the amount of success that we've produced, and it's been game-changing. And I've been very excited and proud to be a part of this company as we've paved this journey. So now you hopefully have an understanding of what Rubrik is and where we come from. So let's talk specifically about my solution, or my baby, if you will, which is called AppFlows, an orchestrated disaster recovery solution. So, and my responsibility is to bring this product to market, which we're going to be doing in the next 2 months or so. So the great thing about doing startups, and I've had an opportunity to do 4 startups in the last 10 years, is that you have blank canvas, right? So you can reassess where the market is today, not where it was 10 years ago, and try to adapt to it. So as we went through our customer advisory boards, our technical advisory boards, and the biggest thing about Rubrik that I love is that we listen to our customers. We really distilled it down into these 3 problem areas that we wanted to address with our solution, because orchestrated disaster recovery has been around for some time. It's a very established vertical. So complexity, the expense, and siloed. So let's double click on those real quickly. First of all, the complexity. That comes in 2 flavors that we found through these interviews that I mentioned a moment ago. First of all, the upfront configuration, right? The complexity of just getting a solution online, what I like to call time to market. You've written the check to the vendor or to your channel partner. Everything is shown up. How long does it take for me to realize value from those dollars spent? So that's a big challenge in which we'll discuss in a moment how we address. The second area is what is most commonly known as configuration drift. We've heard regularly from our clients and customers that I have a DR solution in place, but I don't trust it. That's not a great place to be when you're spending dollars of your company's money on a solution, but you're not in a position where you say, I 100% trust this solution because I know it's up to date. So we'll talk a bit about how we intend to address that. Secondly is the expense. And this isn't necessarily about the dollars and cents, right? I mean, Ford and Chevy have been discounting themselves against each other for years and years. EMC and Purus continue to do it today, and certainly Rubrik does that as well. So, dollars and cents, that's not what I mean here. Specifically, what I'm talking about is the licensing model itself. As I entered into this responsibility, which I've been in for about 5 to 6 months now and done my research, is I've never seen a more vendor-centric licensing model in terms of how DR solutions are licensed. It's a pay-per-VM type of schema or a set of VMs. If you have too many VMs and you hit a pay ceiling and you have to upgrade to a different suite level, which increases the overall cost that you weren't anticipating. And in this area, we really wanted to enable the easiest approach to applying DR automation, not just to your tier 0s and your tier 1s, but give you the financial flexibility and freedom to apply DR automation to all of your applications, not just the most important ones. And lastly, the siloed solution, best of breed, we're all familiar with that. And I think everyone here who's an operationally minded, which I'm assuming most folks would be, is that less is more, right? The free lunches and the free rounds of golf are great in terms of interacting with vendors, but at the end of the day, the less variance you can have in your data center, the less operational overhead that you carry in terms of processes, certification, training, and just overall vendor relations. So we feel like we have a great opportunity here to provide distinct value in data management in terms of backing your data up, but of course, then layering on this additional value of giving you orchestrated disaster recovery. So our approach, first of all, in our opinion, is unique. And really it starts with our backup product once more, because the greatest thing I learned about working for a backup company, and it never occurred to me till I worked here, is that who has access to all of the data? The backup person or the backup organization or whoever has responsibility, because we're backing up all of that data. And again, back to the earlier point, if you're doing it right, you're going to use as few vendors as possible in that area. So we have a foundation now of Rubrik understanding your data, actively backing up your data to meet your business's needs, indexing your data so we further understand it, and adjusting dynamically to the changes within your environment to maintain those SLAs that you've prescribed to us. But the downside of this is that you see up here is that we're a cloud management solution as well. So presumably I could have a primary site, a DR site, a footprint in Office 365, and maybe an AWS for an example. So we had to give ourselves a way to really capture everything that's happening in your environment from an information perspective. So the first thing that we did here is we created a SaaS platform, which we call Polaris. And the way they think about it is this unifies all the metadata that we're creating about your data. And what it gives us is a focal point to understand all of your data in all of the different areas as it moves around, as it gets updated, as it changes. So now we've created a platform in which we can have a perspective of looking and understanding your data holistically, not site to site. And now what we've done with this platform and this insight that we've created for ourselves is we're layering applications that bring distinct value. First of all, we've created a product which we call Radar, which is ransomware remediation. This is extremely powerful because the first thing I'd call out here is it's simply a license, and we're using your backup data to let you know when and if you've been hit by ransomware and when the last point in time the data was accessible, so you don't have to pay a ransom and you can get your business back online as quickly as possible. The second area we've done this to date is with data governance, data classification, which is another product in which I can proudly say to you, it's simply a matter of purchasing a license. The application runs on SaaS. The hardware that you have on site that's actively backing up your data does all the hard work, but it creates no additional need for hardware because ultimately we're a software company. We don't want to sell more hardware if we can avoid it. And that's exactly the delivery model we're taking for AppFlows. It's going to be an application that sits on our SaaS platform, which if the best way to think about it is the bricks are handling the data, all the logic is happening up on the SaaS platform. And we really think this is going to give us a unique angle to the marketplace, because not only can we get extremely aggressive in feature innovation, because it's SaaS, we can add features weekly if we would like. We can resolve bugs much more quickly than any other provider because it's, again, sitting on our platform. We simply do the updates. You consume it as an operator. But it also, again, gives us that perspective and that vision where we can do prim to prim in our first version, but why can't we go prim to cloud later and go cloud to cloud even further into the future? It really gives us a perspective of unique delivery model that we feel like is going to be our edge in this established marketplace. So that's a lot of preamble. Let's talk a little bit about how it works. So first, let's talk about vernacular. So in other companies, you hear terms such as VPGs, runbooks, and otherwise. In our vernacular, that application definition is what we call an application blueprint. This application blueprint is where you're going to tell us these VMs are representative of my application. I want you to boot them up in this order if I have to fail over. What networking would you like me to apply on the DR site? What compute and storage would you like me to leverage? So this is really key in terms of how you tell us what you want us to do. But I mentioned earlier ease of use and time to online. Now, the great thing about this is that we're already providing value to you today with Rubrik. This is a simple configuration because we already know all your VMs. We already know all your tags. We already know all your folders. We already know all your virtual data centers because we're interacting with it actively by backing it up. So this operation is very simple, point and click. It's so simple even a guy like me can do it, so to speak. And I don't even need my SE to do it, I promise you. The second part of it is because Rubrik functions at an object level, not necessarily the storage layer or anything else. If you add storage to a VM, for an example, we simply capture that data and it's now available to you on the DR site. So we're really going to lean in here, but from a standpoint of configuring it initially and ongoing configuration drift concerns, we really feel like we're in a unique position to provide distinct value in this area. Next, let's talk about RTOs. So today, what you see here from a schematic perspective is I'm backing up your data over here on the left-hand side with a rubric, and we're replicating it to a replica DR site to another rubric. So we've got the data moved over to the DR site. Now, the thing we have the ability to turn VMs on directly off of our platform. The thing that we're most concerned about when we brought this product to market is this is an application failover, meaning production now runs elsewhere. And anybody in our space who says they can run as fast as a VMAX or whatever your preferred primary storage provider is, I would challenge that. And we understood that as well. LiveMount is a handy tool to get you out of a pinch and give you instant access to your data, but none of our solutions in this space specifically are designed to run production. But we had to deliver a good RTO. So what we did is we created this concept that we call incremental export. So the idea is I'm backing up the data from the left-hand rubric, which is my representative of my production. I'm replicating it over to my DR site, which is represented on the right-hand side. And what we did is we essentially added a third leg to this replication chain where we're going to proactively place a copy of each one of the VMs in the blueprint into a data store on the DR side that you've designated. Now, it's only a single copy of each of the VMs. It doesn't go into inventory and clutter your vCenter because it's not an inventory. It doesn't use CPU or memory because they're not online. They're just images of these VMs sitting in the waiting. And as we get incremental updates or backups from the production site replicated over, we incrementally update these VMs so that the latest RPO is always sitting at the waiting. Now, what this approach has enabled us to do is provide RTOs that are as aggressive as 5 minutes for 40 VMs in our latest testing. So we feel like this is really going to open us up to deliver a great RTO, consume a minimal amount of production storage possible to give us a lean and mean financial model, and again, provide as much value as we can layered directly upon a high-value backup solution. Now, that isn't all, though, because I told you earlier, financially, we wanted to free you up with our licensing to be able to apply DR automation to all of your applications. So what we're also going to have the ability to do is do an ad hoc export from that DR rubric. And what I mean by that is, and what I just described to you is what you would think of as maybe your tier 0 or tier 1, where I want those VMs to come on as quickly as possible. Now, maybe your tier 3s and your tier 4s, you don't want to consume production storage, but you still want automation. So being able to use an export gives you the ability to hit the big red button, so to speak. However, that brick on the DR side is going to push data over to the data store when you're at the ready, but not consume any of that production storage and runtime, if that makes sense. And really the best example I can give here is imagine part of your DR plan is a test dev environment at DR, and you got to sweep away all that dev information so you have space. This is a great example of how we can apply automation to that as you clean away space for the additional applications that may need to fail over. In terms of RPO, we are very excited to say that in our version 1 product, we are going to be integrated with CDP technology, and we'll boast RPOs as low as 30 seconds. Is what we're seeing in testing. So that may not be down in the single digits, but we're getting way down there. And of course, past version 1, you can expect additional enhancements. But again, the value here is I can apply CDP technology to part of an application stack, apply a 4-hour SLA to different parts of the application stack, and maybe a daily. The way to think about this is maybe I have a 3-tier application that has web, application, and database. The great thing about this blueprint is it's flexible. Each one of those VMs can have their own SLA that's suited to their particular importance. So maybe I back up my web server once a day. I have my application server backing up every 4 hours, and I have my database server being backed up by CDP. All 3 of those can coexist in the same blueprint, giving the ultimate and flexibility for what the application needs, what the application needs are. Because we found most modern applications don't have to have write fidelity across the entire stack, or in a lot of cases, they're much more tolerant than they used to be. In terms of failover and failback, it's rubric simple. 2 clicks to fail over, and with our automated protection on the DR side, because ultimately we are a backup product as well, we'll automatically protect that workload and re-replicate the data to another site so that when you're ready to fail back, it's simply a matter of 2 clicks. But this is all about automating all the tedious things you have to deal with when you fail to a DR site and ultimately want to come back to production. And lastly, I learned this as we've gone along here, is that 9.5 times out of 10, you're not failing over, thank God for all of us. what we're doing is we're testing DR to make sure our business is ready for that disaster in the case that it happens. So not only do we have the ability to do DR testing ad hoc or programmatically, but we're also going to have all the complementary reporting inclusive in the version 1 product that you would need for your auditors, or simply to let your boss know that we're at the ready in the case something goes wrong. So everything I've talked to you about to this point is all about us, is mainly focused on natural disasters, data center outages, and otherwise. But I mentioned earlier the value of being a startup is being able to look at the market in a unique blank canvas type of way. And Sean here, who's part of our customer advisory board, really said it best when we went through this talk with him. He said, I'm 10 times more worried about a ransomware attack than I am about my data center going out. It's just the reality of a modern data center. So let's talk a little bit about what Applos can do in that area. So what if the inevitable happens? I mentioned earlier that we have an immutable file system. Whether you want it or not, you're getting an immutability of Rubrik, which is extremely powerful. Secondly, we have ransomware remediation software that lets you know through machine learning if you've been hit by ransomware and when the last point in time in which your data was accessible. These are two things that we can do today with or without Applos, and has really helped out a lot of customers out there when they've actually been hit, because unfortunately it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when for a lot of us. But everything we've talked about to this point is about automated, orchestrated application recovery. So what if I added that onto the back of what I described to you? And that's exactly what we're intending to do. Not only are we going to integrate Radar, which is our ransomware remediation software, with Applos, so that you as an operator now know exactly what applications are affected and when do I want to recover them to. The second part of this is, the reality is I don't want to fail over to a DR site. My servers are still in the rack, the switches are still there. So what this also we give the capability to do is do an in-place recovery at your local data center. Meaning what we'll do is we'll rewind your production VMs to the point in time you selected, so that we only have to push up the delta between those 2 points, minimizing the amount of data that needs to be pushed up, ultimately maximizing or minimizing the amount of downtime that you may impact. Once you've done that, of course, we'll follow the boot order, postscripts, and everything else that you've prescribed to us inside of the blueprint. And we feel like this is going to be extremely powerful to get applications online as quickly as possible. So this is an end-to-end solution that not only protects you from a natural disaster or a flood or any of these types of things, but is also giving you a way to get your applications back online extremely quickly in the unfortunate case that you may get hit by ransomware or some sort of an attack such as that. So with that, hopefully I stayed on time. Our saying here is don't back up, go forward. I thank you very much for your time, and I'll open it up for questions.
Absolutely, yeah. Great presentation, Carl. We do have a lot of questions. Actually, I see 40 questions in the queue for you. Obviously, a lot of questions and interest about this. I'm going to push out the poll to everyone. I encourage everyone out there to check this poll out on the screen and respond. What additional information would you like about the Rubrik solution? So a lot of questions, as I said. I'm just going to start going down the list. If you see any here that really catch your attention, you want to answer, feel free. Rick is asking, what about SaaS applications like Office 365 or Microsoft 365? Can Rubrik help to protect those?
Yep, absolutely. Today in the marketplace, we have a great solution that's actually ephemeral in nature, so it follows a container type of model that is delivered from Polaris to protect Office 365. So that's an offering that we have, so quote unquote, on the truck today and have had for about a year now. To give you an idea, we've almost, the size customer that we've gotten, or sizes I should say, is much larger than we were even anticipating internally, because we just undersold the amount of need that was there. So that's something I would absolutely reach out to Rubrik about. It isn't necessarily my personal responsibility, but it absolutely is something in the portfolio today.
Okay, excellent. And then there's another question here about automation. Can Rubrik help with automation? How easy is it to automate?
It's actually an API-first company, I'm happy to say. Both Polaris and the solutions which are on-premise, which we call CDM or Cloud Data Management. So 100% we're able to automate. If you would like to script directly to it, yeah, I would actually direct you to Rubrik Go is what I believe our website is, and we actually have prepackaged SDKs, PowerShell, and different abilities for you to actually have some automation in the programming language of your choice. But really from inception, we're an API-first, GUI-second company, so 100% you're able to automate. I would mention here also, if you use a CDMB technology such as ServiceNow, we actually can plug ourselves into that as well from a workflow perspective. So we can automate everything up to and including not only the backup of a new VMs created, but also their recovery.
Very nice. And then there's a question from Sheldon out there about incremental backups. How far back do those go? I would assume you configure those with backup policies of some kind?
Yeah, so it's actually an incremental forever solution, which is maybe a little different than you've seen from more legacy type of providers. So it is one full and an incremental is forever. I don't want to get into the whole technical spiel of how we do it, but essentially we do running updates to the master image, if you will. But you can go back. We create a synthetic full at the point in time in which you select. I know that sounds a little cryptic, but hopefully it partially answers the answer. But net, the incremental forever schema is forever.
Excellent. Nathan's asking about what kind of compliance reports are available.
From an AppFlow specific perspective, we're focusing mainly on the DR testing initially, which is the idea of showing what steps we've taken, how long they've taken, their success and failure, and giving the operator an opportunity to input. We also have other reports which are more around readiness, such as just making sure that the data stores you select on the DR side are healthy, have enough space, things of that nature. So our version 1 is very much like that, but I'm very excited to say as well, because it's SaaS delivered and all the logic's on SaaS. If there's a report we don't have that you want, it's something that we can produce in extremely short order.
Excellent. There's a question about deployment times. What does it take to get started with Rubrik?
With Rubrik, the on-premise solution is, we call it bootstrapping internally, if anyone's familiar with that old programming term. Getting online is about 15 minutes, believe it or not. Once you give us rack, power, and plumbing, the onlining process is about 15 minutes. Because we're an SLA-driven company in terms of how we approach backup, you simply tell us backup every 4 hours, keep it for 7 days, and so on. And since we integrate with VMware, for an example, what you can do is actually, because we manage all the jobs for you, if you will, you can literally tell us, back up my entire vCenter with this SLA and go to lunch. We've actively done that in POC. So your online is less than a day for even a very large solution.
That's awesome. Question here about Rubrik. Does it run on a hardware appliance? Is it a software solution? Like, what's the packaging here for Rubrik?
Yeah, so we have two different approaches in which you can do this. So first of all, you can buy our bricks. What we call them bricks, by the way. That probably didn't sound without the preface there, which is the hardware, which our software just delivered on open hardware, if you will. And a lot of folks really like that because it's just simpler. They don't have to mess with getting servers. But we do absolutely have a list of servers where you can buy software only, and we are qualified on. So you do have the flexibility of going, if you have a purchasing agreement with HP or Dell, we absolutely support models in both of those stacks, or you can simply buy the hardware from us. And I would mention also we have licensing OpEx models, which will give you refresh options that are very aggressive, up to and including free refreshes when you renew the licensing. So it's really up to you, but we are trying to provide as much flexibility as we can. And AppFlows, again, is SaaS delivered in terms of my solution, so that's obviously no hardware required.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. Well, there's 45 more technical questions there for you in the queue. So a lot of interest. Perhaps you can get back to some of those folks. I'm sure they would appreciate it. But really great presentation. Thanks so much for being on the event today, Carl.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. Everyone have a wonderful day. Thanks. Have a great event.
Thank you. And thanks to the audience for all the excellent questions. We do appreciate those. We'll be routing those to Carl over at Rubrik to respond to. And of course, for more information on the Rubrik solution, check out your handouts tab. And it's there that you'll find a URL that will take you to the Rubrik 101 live product demos. It's a whole series of presentations on getting to know the Rubrik product step by step. So make sure that you check those out. It looks like a great resource if you want to learn more. And so I'll leave up the poll question here while I announce our next prize winners. All right, we have another Amazon $500 gift card. This one's going to Sarah Toby from Ohio, and another grand prize for an Apple M1 MacBook Air. This is going to John Jennings from Illinois. Congratulations to the prize winners. Make sure you stay tuned. More prizes to give out, and of course, more awesome presentations. Speaking of which, it's now time for our next presentation on the Megacast. I'm excited to introduce Mr. Mike Oakes, Senior Pre-Sales Engineer at Atempo. Mike, it's great to have you.
Hey, thanks, David. Great to be with you.
Absolutely. Take it away, Mike.
Real quickly, who are we, right? So Atempo. Everybody consider that. So who's Atempo, basically, right? So we are a company that's been in the business about 30 years, right? In the field of data preservation, protection. As you can see in the slides here, 2,000 customers, 200 employees worldwide. We're well north of that now. And basically, our organization enables customers to preserve and manage their data ecosystems, regardless of that data set size, where it's located anywhere in the world, as well as the organization size. And the solutions are designed to scan, protect, store, facilitate movement, provide easily searchable functionality. There's some analytics tools that are coming in later this year, so you're going to have an analytics suite that also is part of the Myria tool we're going to talk about today. One quick note, these solution sets, they are software-based. They're a software model appliance. So you can reuse your hardware, repurpose what you have. You can use VMs. We have configuration guides that you can, and we help with, and sizing solution sets. And we're not talking about big apparatuses here. It's 1U boxes, 2 CPUs, some cores. It's just to match the workflow that needs to be done, or workflows that need to be done, so to speak. So with that being said, I want to step back for 1 second, because I know you guys have heard a couple of different presentations today. What I'd like to focus on, one quick thing is, no two DR solutions or planning sets are the same, right? They have some similar functionality, similar workflows underneath, but they're never going to be exactly the same. And I'm going to use this as an example here. We have like a small SMB here to the left that you see, maybe a petabyte, maybe half a petabyte, but they have everything running on that particular data silo, right? It's HR, it's finance, it's the production, marketing. In the event of a failure, do they need all that to come back and run on it as soon as possible, or smaller subset, right? So maybe it's 100 or 200 terabytes running on a local disk. Maybe it's a mirror, maybe it's a replication or something along those lines, or maybe it's a backup they can immediately recall. Everything else is pushed to cloud or tape. Versus, say, a Fortune 500 company, right? 7 by 24, 365, 4 nines, 5 nines. We all hit it. So I need 6 nines of protection, right? A little bit different, well, a lot of bit different actually. Everything needs to be air gap protected. It goes to tape, right? So there's no way anything nefarious can happen to that data. On top of that, though, they need to be able to run almost immediately in the case of an incident, whether it's, they've lost access to a facility, network issues, somebody corrupted a file system, something bad happened. So, and basically that's being facilitated by the set of disks you see here to the right. Sorry, in a solution we call basically Snap Store. I'm going to get into more about that in a few seconds. But as you can see, they're different. They both need DR. They both need some type of backup and archive strategy. But what their SLAs are, what their return times are, Fortune 500, I need to be almost back up online immediately, or I have a little bit of time with the SMB. So how you implement and how you structure and how you plan out, kind of different. So I talked about Myria early on, first on the presentation, once I got the slides moving, that is. And what you see here are the 4 pillars. And there's a 5th pillar I mentioned that's coming, and we're going to call it the analytics package. And it's going to be included. It's not something you're going to pay extra for when you purchase the Myria suite of products. That analytics package will come with it. And we felt that was important to manage your data, understand where things are at, having a full scan. Even things you aren't backing up, you can go and take a look at with this analytics tool. But these 4 pillars. So you have Myria for backup here at the top, and the bottom position at 6 o'clock, Myria for archiving. We've been doing this. This is the data preservation and protection package we've been doing for 30 years. We've just evolved the product, put enhancement feature sets in and so forth over the time frame. The newer things you see are to the left and to the right. Right? So to the right, you'll see something called Myria for migration, 3 o'clock position. This is more from a tool for thinking I need to collapse data silos. I'm just going to mention it real briefly. Or I need to come off an older piece or legacy piece of storage and come to something newer, bigger, faster. Maybe it has analytics with it, some type of storage. This tool is used for that. This is basically, it's thinking you get the software set up for a set amount of time. There's a license capacity you want to move in some professional services. We do them as professional service, but you can do them yourselves if you so choose, and we can train people up. Really what's used more in the DR and protection world is the one to the left, or at the 9 o'clock position. Think of this one's Myria for data moving. This is copy, sync, and move, but more importantly, replication. Oh, I said synchronization already. So if I want to have a copy of a file system somewhere else, fully replicated, I can use this portion of the tool to do it. The tool comes with all of these feature sets natively installed You just license what you enable. So that being said, why did we build Myria the way we built it, and why did we build it to address some of this DR workflow scenarios we've seen? The big ones that come down the pike, right, is the ability to, and it says hybrid architectures here, but being able to take advantage of storage models, regardless of who that vendor is. I may have a completely homogeneous infrastructure. I have some NAS, I have some GPFS, maybe Lustre. I'm using cloud, I've got tape. How do I pull all that together? Put it into a heterogeneous architecture that I can use for disaster recovery, that I can use for backup, that I can facilitate movement between different locations under a controlled methodology to help improve my workflow, take better advantage of those assets, right? Now, one quick note, we are, it says multiple file systems here, so, connecting those dissimilar file systems, but we're a file level tool, not block. Just want to, mention that real quickly. But also, taking advantage of new models that are coming down the pike. How do you integrate cloud? Maybe I need to do reverse cloud. Maybe I decided I went to one type of cloud I don't want. I want to put it on another. I want to go from public to private to public, private to back on site, back on prem, or public to on-prem, I should say. But also ensuring one last thing, air gap protection. Because of cryptoviruses and everything else, making sure my data is protected and it's air gap from my production. That basically that gold certificate copy kept somewhere safe and secure. So why did we do and what did we do and when did we do it? So about 5 to 7 years ago, we took a hard look at the unstructured data market. And we saw 5 key things that needed to be incorporated in the tool. Some of it we were already doing, we just enhanced it. Large data protection, that's key. That had to be in the product, and it's been in the product. I mean, we do protection for sites in hundreds of petabytes today. But it says hybrid storage here, and I just mentioned hybrid architectures on the backside. Hybrid architectures are critically important to have. How do I take use of dissimilar infrastructures or dissimilar platforms to meet my workflow, and how do I do it seamlessly? We want to make sure that was addressed. That was a key feature to have in the tool. Data availability, that was a given. There's no sense of having a DR plan if you can't get to your data when you need it, right? It has to be available. It has to be available from any location, right, at any time. Doesn't matter when it happens, but you need to be able to access it. So having data online 24/7, 365, key ingredient to having the product, right? Migration I talked about was more for that unstructured explosion of unstructured data market, that consumption creation. How do I manage that ever-growing data, those data silos, and migrate to newer silos or better silos or something that I can use for the next 3 years seamlessly, easily. And then having something that's flexible and scalable. Flexible in the model that I can add those new storage models when they come down the pike. Cloud, disk, tape, what comes next. So modular code, right? Smart code. But also scalable. And I'm going to talk about data movers in a second, but what I'm going to say here is to scale out. DR solutions, backups change over time. Organizations grow. So having a tool that allows you, an appliance that allows you to grow with it without having to do, a forklift upgrade of things, or spend an exorbitant amount of money for new hardware and software was important. Once you purchase a product from us, there's what we call agents, which are data movers. You can have one or you can have 100. It doesn't matter. There's no extra licensing from us. So as your workflow changes and increases, you can increase your number of data movers. And you can have them on disk, you can have them on base metal, you can have them on virtual machines, you can put them in the cloud, so to speak. You can basically place them wherever you want and mix and match them as needed. That being said, what is the architecture? Because I mentioned data movers. So real quickly to the left, you'll see something that says Myria. Think of this as the agent. When I do these presentations, it's the traffic cop. It is responsible for all, basically, communication, synchronization of jobs, scheduling, parallelization, putting things to the data movers. Everything CLI, GUI, command line, I mean, you name it, goes through the Myria server. We did this intentionally because we wanted to have the data protect on the backside. No user could log into a hardware data mover and access one of our agents and tell it to do something. We lock it down. It only accepts communication from the server. Now, you can have one server. You can have a second server for HA in a different location. We use Postgres for our database. It comes with the product. You don't have to go out and get an extra database. It comes included with the product. We take care of upgrading it and so forth when there's changes, and we do upgrades to our software. So, and like I said, we'll keep it in sync. Now, those data movers. These are the engines. Their function is what their name is. They are moving data from point A to point B. Now, they can be pooled. So I can have, maybe I want to keep things separated. I want to have HR and finance and its data go to a specific location, completely locked down. Maybe it's off-site somewhere. And I want to have it, secured. And only those data movers do that work. Because maybe you want to lock them down to a certain CIS hardening level or something along those lines. You can do that. You can pull those off. You can have them sit somewhere. And by the way, if you need to send things encrypted, you could put data movers into different locations, and we'll encrypt as we read the data off the source. Whatever we're going to on the other side just before apply, we'll hit that other data mover, we'll decrypt it and apply it down to that storage. Now, it can be a key you give us, or we can do SSL TLS and just do a handshaking encryption in flight between the two data movers. Now, the other thing you can do with these data movers, as you notice here, they can do multiple jobs. You see this thing's representation, disk, cloud, tape here. One data mover can talk to them all. It all depends on as long as it has a network access. And if it's an encrypted piece of storage, maybe it's going to AWS, Amazon S3. On the encrypted side, we can talk encrypted to it, not a problem. We'll also push down to Glacier and Deep Glacier. We also talk to Azure, GCP, anything that's talking S3, and Swift. Just want to mention that real quick. So these data movers, one thing to keep in mind is that when they're facilitating data movement, if you're worried about preservations of ACLs or POSIX information, you can use Windows data movers, or you should use Windows data movers for anything that's going to be talking with an SMB protocol. Why? Preserve the ACL permissions. We'll store them in our database. Now, we'll also, if we're doing a replication or we're doing something called Snap Store, we'll also put them on the file system we're replicating. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. If you're doing something that's POSIX-based, you're going to use Linux data movers, and we'll also incorporate or import the permission structure into our database. Why? For cross-platform retrieval and playback. So I can take something off one platform, put it on another, and I'll replay the appropriate permissions in line when the data is laid back down. So moving on real quickly. So there's some technology under the hood that these data movers use. And I talked about how you could pool data movers, maybe if you want to do HR and something else, marketing, or somebody want to be on a separate set of data movers. Same thing with data, you can pool them. What we do a little differently than most is from the data movement perspective, right? We're talking about preserving and protecting data. So the window of vulnerability, when a file gets created or something gets created till it gets backed up or moved, right? The more you can shrink that, right, that window of vulnerability, the more safer you can feel and your data is being protected quicker, faster, right? So we do that in a couple of different ways. One, by parallelization of tasks. On a file system, that may be the first time backup, we're going to have to walk it. We're going to walk the entire file system, but we're going to have some algorithms under the hood, some high watermarks, so to speak, to basically say, after I've run for so much time looking for data, or I've scanned so much data that needs to be acted upon, or so many files that need to be acted upon, fire up a sub-job or sub-task underneath the main task and start moving that data now. Don't wait till the whole scan is done. Get it in play immediately. And then look for more data. And we'll continue to do that. You can set the number of subtasks. I'm going to use a number, say 8. Maybe I have 4 data movers running. What will happen here is we'll put the first subtask on the first available data mover. The next time we meet that high watermark, we'll put it on the next one. And we'll keep doing that until all those 8 slots are filled up, and we're just going to blast data as fast as possible. But now what we've done is we've looked for data, we're looking for data, and we're moving data at the same time, right? So we're doing it in parallel. Coupled with that is when we're doing things on the data movers you can have either cores or multiple CPUs if it's a VM. We can take those vCPUs, those cores, and you can set this under the hood to say maybe I want to have 4 copy engines or 4 movement engines in each data mover. So what we'll do now is in parallel, we're parallelizing data across and transfer the data movers Plus, we're multi-threading transactions through each data mover with those cores. Again, it's all about getting that data protected that much faster, backed up that much faster. Coupled with that, there's a thing at the bottom that says snapshot, right? So BSS and proprietary APIs. What we can do in storage is we can talk to the snapshotting, basically API features on. So things like NetApp, Isilon, Cumulo, Huawei, there's GPFS. We have one we call FastScan for Lustre. It doesn't use snapshotting, it uses kernel change aware information. We can basically have a snapshot taken or hit the server in case of a Lustre and say, give me a change list of what's been changed since the first scan happened. So an example is maybe we're doing something off of an Isilon. We'll go ahead and trigger a snapshot the first time we do a data movement. Backup, replication, synchronization, doesn't matter. At that point, we'll walk that snapshot, and we'll use it to move data. We're walking it to validate it. Once it's validated, we'll mark it good. The next time we have to run, we'll take another snapshot, and we'll say, now give me a differential list from those two snapshots. What's changed since the last time we did this? We'll import that into the server. The server will parse it, just like it was parsing regular data, walking a file system, and break it up into chunks, and they'll send it out to the data movers. If you're talking about a multi-petabyte file system, it could have taken hours to walk, depending on how big it is. Maybe it was a day, depending on what you're doing. With snapshotting, you could be actually starting data transfers within 5 minutes. Right? All depends on that change rate, how much data we have to parse through. But it's very quickly, again, reducing that window of vulnerability. It's also used in the SnapStore product that I'm going to talk about coming up in a second. It's just basically think of it as a backup that I can run on, fully versioned, but fully accessible in case of a DR. That's when we'll talk about SnapStore next. And I talk about the fast scan at the bottom, coupled with the snapshotting, right? So no need to walk the file system, detect those delta changes, right, between two snapshots. Quick, seamless, get that data protected that much faster. So just real quickly, I'm just going to jump through this one, but think of this as what happens whether it's a snapshot or not. And we can do a fast scan. Full walk of data the first time around, right? Initial backup has to be done. We walk the data and we transfer it. But we do it in parallel because we do it in chunks. As we find stuff that needs to be moved, we get it going. Now, after that, it's an incremental. You can do an incremental, which you see here, it just changes. One thing to note when we do incrementals too, if you want us to detect changes in a file system where things have been deleted, but you don't want them deleted from the backup, or you do, depending on which way you want to do it, we can say, delete on detection, or you know what, after that file's been deleted, wait 2 years or wait 6 months before you remove it from the backup. So you get pretty granular what you control in the backup and from the DR perspective. Also, what you can do is this can go into perpetuity. We call it backup with incremental forever. But also, you can schedule these any way you see fit for your workflow. You may want to do a backup, full backup once a month, an incremental, or once a quarter, and incrementals for the other 89 days. You can do that. The tool is very flexible, and you can get into places where I want to back up certain types of files or certain places in a location in a file system and exclude certain things. We don't want to be backing up snapshots. So those by default, everybody wants to exclude, like don't back up .snapshot. But it's very granular how you can set up the tool. So that being said, I mentioned something called SnapStore, and I'm going to talk about it in 1 second. But from a DR perspective, whether it's on-prem or as a service somewhere, you can use that copy synchronization tool and replication to basically make an online copy somewhere else that you can immediately run on. But that also means now you're going to have to back it up, which you can do. You could do an air backup to tape and have a replicated DR. You have all your copies on tape, all your versions on tape, and you have your file system in 2 different locations. Maybe use DFS so you can work between the two, or maybe it's just, hey, primary went down, IT just points everybody to the other side. There's another a feature set underneath the tool set for backup called SnapStore. What this allows us to do is anything we can talk to an API to, NetApp, Cumulo, Isilon, I mentioned the others, Huawei, GPFS, we can basically, as long as we can talk to that API on both sides, from the source and the target, which is going to be the backup, we can turn that into an online backup that you can run on the event of a failure. Now, in this case, we're talking about here, what you're seeing is you have users, you've got finance, right? Maybe the people that are doing some analytics, the C office people, they're all using the file system. And they're all accessing through their user shares, and you have your NAS repository and backup on the other side. So we're constantly backing up the data. Maybe you're telling us to sync it or back it up every 5 minutes or every a day or whatever the time frame is you can set. What's important is also the versions are all there, right? So you get full version capability on that other side. Now, in the event of something going wrong, nefariously or otherwise, right, and some type of disaster happens, you lose connection, you can basically have IT, again, repoint or use some other type of apparatus to that other side, that DR side. It may be local, it may be somewhere across the country, wherever your DR location is. You can start running on it immediately, right? So think of that, that 6 nines or 5 nines of availability I was talking about earlier for Fortune 500 companies. Shift the user workload over. Maybe it's the same size, maybe it's smaller. They can be dissimilar systems. I could have a NetApp and a Cumulo, right? One being a backup for the other, or GPFS and something else. So, but what happens here is now you're still in production, you're still running, while you're figuring out what happened to your primary site. So you've bought yourself some time. Let's figure out what happened. Was it a nefarious act? Did it just lose network? Did somebody do something unintentional and destroy parts of the file system? Did we get a virus? Whatever it happens to be. You get that fixed, you can reconstitute it, right? You reconstitute that production file system, and now you can sync back with that NAS repository. And if something happened, say maybe on a Thursday, and you know it was bad on Thursday and you don't want to restore to that point, maybe you want to go back to Wednesday. You can do that straight from that NAS repository, right? From that basically that snap store copy. We have the notion of time navigation. You can go back in time and say, I want to reconstitute from Tuesday at noon or Tuesday at whatever, right? And you can start and you have that file system reconstitute back. Once that's reconstituted, basically at that point everybody back, right? And now you're back up and running in full production and using that backup repository again as a snap store backup. And online, basically think of it as a DR archive, ready to go at a moment's notice. So real quickly, I just want to mention a few things. If anybody's used Atempo in the past in our ADA Mirror suite of products, you might remember we were a 6-in type GUI. There was an admin GUI, there was a user GUI, you had to have some type of Windows box or something to talk to the appliance or administer it and so forth. We're moving away from that. We're now using basically HTTP or HTTPS-based web GUI, so you can basically hit from anywhere in the world. You can manage basically your repositories, and I'll talk about that in Easy Move in a second, which is just pulling data back from somewhere. You'll notice here I have a bunch of projects under repositories. Those are just archive or backup projects that are ongoing. In this case, we're going to use video backup. What video backup does, in this case, we went ahead and we drilled into it for a second. You can see there's a bunch of different folders, a bunch of different files. You can choose to pick on one and remove it, or retrieve it, I should say. You could remove it if you have access. This is something that I wanted to mention too. You can have full access, administrative access into this GUI, or if you restrict users to read only, they'll only be able to read things. And they'll only be given access, if need be, if you want to do user backups, to what storage apparatuses and projects you've assigned them to. Others, they will not see. It's not it's grayed out or anything like that. They are not given access, period, because we want to make sure the data is protected. They don't need to know about everybody else. So from that standpoint, maybe now we drilled into that one of those files there. In this case, it was a .mov file. And you notice here I talked about time navigation. In this GUI, you'll see about, 3, 6, 7 different files. Same file, different instances in time. And you can take a look at the time. If you stored a hash with it, it would tell you the type of hash that it was stored with and the actual hash itself. And you can choose which one you want to bring back. In the case of media, you can also do what you can see as a play button there, so you can actually play media files, so to speak, if you have those on your particular workflow. But once you've done that, basically go through and decide which one you want. You can basically it clicks in and you click on say I want this one, so it'll take you right to that file. And on the right hand side, where do you want to put it? You'll notice there's two things. One looks like a disk, and what on the right hand side in blue, and then to the right of that there's something with like a file folder. That's the archive. So in this case, we're coming from an archive on the left, and we want to put it someplace on the right. As long as we've been given access, we can do that. full administration access, you get access to everything. Now, once you do that, you select it, you tell it where you want to go, you just add it. And you can add multiple things at the same time in here to move. Hit the validate bucket, we'll go and execute on that particular order. So real quick, I want to wrap this up. I know it's a lot of information in a short amount of time. So why atempo? First of all, we talked about at the beginning, right? Dissimilar architectures. How do I manage those complex data sets across dissimilar architectures into a heterogeneous environment? We do that. We facilitate that. Protection, movement, right? Backup, archive, all of that across dissimilar infrastructures. Right? We've been doing this. We're a global player in the vendor agnostic unstructured data market. That's a one long bullet there. But we've been doing this for 30 years. So data protection and preservation, that's our bedrock. That's our foundation. And we've done that, and we do that now with this wide set of tools I talked about: fast scan, API integration, parallelization, multi-threading, protecting the data that much faster, getting it to that location needs to be that much faster. Very cost effective, right? We're all software. You can reuse your hardware. You get the tools under the hood. You can license them as you needed. You can expand without having to pay more cost for more software. The data movers you can add as you need to. When your workflow grows, your production grows, you can grow your environment to meet your needs. And also 24/7. So sun never set support, sorry. That's important because during a DR scenario, when you need to recover, if something happens where you need to get a hold of somebody for help, you need to know someone's going to be there. We have locations in Paris, we have locations in the US, and in Asia. So there's always someone on call to help should you need it. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to you, David. Sir.
Great presentation, Mike. Really fascinating, cool stuff that you guys are doing there at atempo. We got a lot of good questions coming in. While we take these questions from the audience, I'm just going to bring up, we've got a couple of polls. The first one for everyone out there is, what's the volume of your petascale data set? And so let's see, first question, Mike, I see there's a lot of them. I see over 25 or 30 here, actually. What about encryption and security of the data that's protected? What's available there?
So we do encryption in flight, as I mentioned earlier. We'll also work with things that do encryption at rest. So if you're talking to a device or an apparatus that has encryption at rest, like a tape drive or some other type of disk appliance, we'll do encryption at rest. What we're adding in the product later this year is if the apparatus you're talking to doesn't do encryption at rest, we'll start to do it. We'll take care of doing that for you. Okay,
excellent. Next question, they're asking, what about migrating data, the downtime associated with that? Are there ways to minimize that downtime?
Yeah, and that's an excellent question. So that migration suite or package I talked about, it also uses that fast scan technology if we can talk to it. But also, you can stay online in production while we're migrating data because the way we parallelize and multi-thread things, we can tune back how much data is moved at a particular time. So you can stay online constantly while you're migrating the data. Usually at a cutover time is when you're going to take a quick outage because you're going to move your users from your source to your target.
Okay, excellent. There's a question here about they're struggling to meet their backup windows. They're asking, are there ways to do backup or incrementals and still meet our backup windows?
I'm going to say yes without knowing more about the data. So, right, depending on how much the change rate is a day in an incremental, can you talk to the APIs? We can facilitate 9 times out of 10, greatly reduce the backup window and get your data where it needs to be. We just need to know more about it. So reach out to atempo and we can probably help you with that.
Excellent. What about verifying backup integrity? There's a question here from Ted about that.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So we do have in the feature, we think of a backup integrity. We do things in the notion of we call storage manager containers. And a container is just a place we're storing the data, right? There's a button within the tool that you can go up and say, I want to run a report, or I want to verify the integrity of the storage manager container, and it will go out and do that. It can go out and check hashes against the data that's stored on disk or tape or somewhere else. We'll also take advantage of, if you're doing it to tape, you can actually, there's newer tape drives that allow you to basically put the hash with the file in line, and you can tell us, go check that. And what we'll do is we'll tell the tape drive to go do all the work, so you don't have to pull any data back. It'll do all the encryption and checking on the tape drive.
Awesome. And for everyone out there, I'm going to bring up our next poll question, and it is, what additional information would you like about the Atempo solution? Next question, they're asking about reporting. Is there a simple way to know what actions have been taken on the data? Has it been moved, archived, replicated? What information can you provide about that?
So every time a job runs, it'll give you a report on what it did, and how many files it moved, how much data it moved, how long it took, even with the migration, how long a scan took. It'll tell you all that information. Coupled with that, with the analytics package that's going to drop, there's also logs that you can look at. But coupled with that, with the analytics package that's going to drop later this year, you can start to look at data in the silos and tag it yourself for movement and archive and so forth, but also get a picture, dashboard. You can set your own dashboards up to get an understanding of what's moved, what's not, where it's located, what archive it's in, what to users. All that information you can glean out of those reports and those dashboards.
Very nice, very nice. Another question here about, can SnapStore work in any DR scenario?
It can work in any DR scenario that we have access to the APIs. So we need an API on both sides, basically taking a snapshot, doing a transfer, and applying those permissions. If not, we can do basically a straight synchronization if SnapStore is not available, and you have still have a full DR that way.
Excellent. And does Myria have any sort of size or scaling limitations?
Not at the moment. We have people that use, like I said, hundreds of petabytes, like in the media industry, that we manage hundreds upon hundreds of petabytes of data with, I think the last one I saw recently was 27 to 30 data movers. It's basically the limitation of the architecture that you're talking to, not so much our architecture.
Nice. There's a question here, about the new analytics feature. Is that an additional package that folks purchase, or is it included?
Included. So there's no extra purchase. It comes with the Myria suite of products. And the reason we did this is, whether it's an archive or backup, synchronization, whatever, you need to know where your data is so you can make the best business decision. And I'm going off on a tangent here for a second. But it's not just data we've acted upon. You can start to look at other storages via a thin client that just goes and talks to it real fast, to look at other data points around your company so you can get an understanding of where all your data resides and best manage it.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, Mike, I'm afraid we're running out of time here in our live Q&A session, but there's 37 more questions for you there in the queue, so a lot of excitement around the solution. Thank you so much for being on the event today.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone.
And for more information on Atempo Myria, check out the handout that's available there in your audience console for download in the Handouts tab. Of course, also visit atempo.com. And I'll leave up the poll question for everyone to answer out there if you haven't done so yet, while I announce our next Amazon $500 gift card winner. This is going out to Michael McConville from Maryland. Congratulations, Michael McConville from Maryland. We've got, four more gift cards and 3 more Apple M1 MacBook Airs to give away still on the event. Also, don't forget about our best question prizes as well. All right. Thank you to everyone who responded to the poll. Let's keep the Megacast moving. And now I'm excited to introduce you to our next 2 presenters. Welcome, Mr. Matt Slaughton, Senior Manager for Technical Marketing Engineering at Nutanix, and Mr. Ryan Ganato, Solutions Architect and Product Owner at Veeam. Matt and Ryan, are you there?
We are. Hopefully you can hear me.
I can, yeah.
Hey, thanks for having us today.
Absolutely. Take it away.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, I guess my name's Matt Slott. We'll kick things off here and then jump right in. I'm a Senior Manager, Technical Marketing Engineering here at Nutanix, focused on Nutanix Mine with Veeam. I'm joined today by my co-presenter, Ryan. Ryan, you want to do a quick intro?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Matt, and thanks, everybody. I hope everybody's off to a great start today. So Ryan Ganato, I'm a Solutions Architect and Product Owner for Nutanix Mine with Veeam here on the Veeam side. Been with the company for just over 3 years now.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan. Cool. So we're going to dive in. We've got a quick animation video to watch, and then we'll run through our Nutanix Mine with Veeam solution. And per kind of the format that you guys have seen in the conference so far, definitely open to Q&A at the end. Definitely want to try to keep it interactive. So any questions you guys have that come up, feel free to put them in the Q&A. All right. So with that, let's jump into our cartoon.
Adam is excited about his upcoming camping trip with his friends. Nora is also busy preparing for the long-awaited weekend outing. On the way to the campsite, Adam received a text message from Nora saying that she'll join the group a little late because something urgent came up at work. Adam didn't think much of the message and carried on. His company invested in robust data protection using Nutanix Mine with Veeam that keeps on-site and off-site workloads protected and accessible for monitoring and management. He had nothing to worry about at the office. However, Nora quickly knows that her camping trip is out the window. Her company's data has been hacked and corrupted, possibly beyond repair. She and her team must work around the clock to figure out the extent of the damage. Things get worse for Nora's team as they must restore data from unreliable and fragmented multiple locations. Nora realizes that her company's recent decision not to upgrade to private cloud-like data protection was a big mistake. They would have been able to monitor all their workloads, protect their data, and remove data silos. Nora could have avoided all of her troubles with the Nutanix Mine with Veeam Universal Data Protection. The solution provides the security, reliability, and business continuity that her company lacks, and her company could have saved a lot of money too. The company data would have been encrypted, centrally monitored, and managed. Private and public cloud tiering and immutable backup copies would have also enabled the company to restore operations quickly. Be a happy camper. Secure your company's digital assets with Nutanix Mine with Veeam Data Protection. Enjoy peace of mind and put an end to unpredictable IT troubles with Nutanix and Veeam.
All right. So we'll dive into our presentations. Hopefully I gave everybody a good overview, kind of high level, what Nutanix Mine with Veeam is. We're going to dive in a little bit deeper here and walk through the solution and how it's assembled, how it's put together. I guess with that, I'm going to dive into the first slide. So Ryan, you want to take it away here?
Yeah, absolutely. I also want to just be mindful of the audience. I know probably for most it's either right during or right after lunchtime, so thought we would sort of mix up the flow a little bit with a nice video, which hopefully, intros the idea of Nutanix Mine with Veeam. We'll talk about this in more depth in a couple of moments here, but also wanted to take a step back and say, hey, who are the vendors on that video? What were those logos? And so, for those that don't know, Veeam software, we've been around for just over 10 years now, and really, started out with our bread and butter within the virtualization protection space, but have certainly since expanded our horizons all over the entire backup and data protection infrastructure, from legacy systems in terms of physical and virtual workloads, things that are application specific, and then being able to make that transition into this ever-growing complex hybrid and multi-cloud kind of world. So from start to finish, Veeam has you covered from a data protection perspective from end to end, and that's certainly with attention to data security and compliance. Something, as we saw in the video, which could have saved the time of one of the data center admins there, and from having to cancel on a camping trip. So we at Veeam, we like to think that we can unlock the power of your data and enable digital transformation. And so, I won't spend too much time here, but want to say that it's not just us, saying and believing that, we have been recognized by most of the major agencies out there. We are a Magic Quadrant leader for a couple years running now within Gartner, a leader in the Forrester Wave, and actually #1 as categorized by IDC in market share growth, #1 in EMEA overall, and #3 worldwide. Certainly something that we owe and attribute to our 400,000 plus customers worldwide, landing in the majority of the Global 2000 and Fortune 500. But it really wouldn't be possible without the focus on the customer, and you'll see that as a common theme, across the board with both us and with Nutanix. We have an NPS score of +75, which is 3 times the industry average, and so we thank you for that support for those of you that use Veeam out there. Toss it over to Matt to give a little bit about Nutanix.
Awesome. Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, to Ryan's point, I'm an avid camper myself. I like to focus on bears, not backups when I'm camping, or at least avoiding bears and not have to recover backups. There's my corny joke for everybody. So anyways, again, yeah, I'm Matt Slaughton here at Nutanix. Much like Veeam, we are the market leader in our space. You can see here both Gartner and Forrester Wave, Magic Quadrants, Nutanix, leaning heavily to the top upper right for hyperconverged infrastructure. And to Ryan's point, I mentioned focus on the customer, right? It was a natural fit for our two companies to come together to deliver Nutanix Mine because, we're obsessed with our customers, right? We want to make sure that we deliver the best possible experience, the easiest possible implementation for our customers and their hyperconverged or virtual infrastructure workloads. So following along from that, similar to Veeam, very proud of our stats here from a customer perspective. Over 18,000 customers to date. This is actually slightly out of date now, too. I think we actually ticked over 19,000 just recently. Customer retention, 96% customer retention. That's a 90-plus net promoter score, 7-year average, and 4.9 out of 5 for Gartner Peer Insights. So, like I said, very, very focused on our customer and customer satisfaction. And that carries through Nutanix Mine with Veeam product, both from a support and product perspective. So high level, what is Nutanix Mine with Veeam? In a nutshell, it is hyperconverged infrastructure for your backup workloads and cloud data management. Right, so it's a combined solution rather than Nutanix going off and trying to develop our own kind of customized backup solution. We recognize Veeam's leadership in the industry and wanted to partner and leverage the power of Veeam and all of their backup repository capabilities, backup features with our best in class, best breed HCI platform. So as a result, we put together this joint solution that is optimized and automated. So essentially, it follows our one-click mentality, where you're able to essentially deploy and automate the deployment of your dedicated backup solution. And it deploys all of the components, both Nutanix and Veeam, in following best practices of both vendors. So you'll ensure that you have the best possible performance, resiliency, and capabilities of your backup solution. Following from that, operational availability and flexible scaling, because we're hyperconverged infrastructure, make it super easy to scale. You can start small, as few as 4 nodes, and you can scale up for the Mine cluster up to 8, but then we also have the additional capability to tier off to object storage, whether that's cloud object storage, or in Nutanix's case, we have our Nutanix object storage, which can be deployed on a cluster, and Veeam can fully leverage using things like object lock, which we can talk about later. Following from that, simplified management, because we've joined partnership here with Veeam. We've created a unified dashboard for the solution, right? So you can actually manage the entire backup solution within the Nutanix Prism interface. We integrate with all the Veeam components to pull up your backup statistics. You're running backups. You can pull reports, all from the unified dashboard. To that point earlier about the ability to leverage object storage, we have cloud flexibility, right? So for on-prem, we can start with Nutanix Mine cluster. As you scale out, you can add additional nodes, and then you can actually leverage something like Nutanix Objects or S3, any S3 compatible object storage, and leverage the cloud for cloud tiering to tier off your backup workloads to other storage. And as a result, this provides hassle-free backup confidence, right? So we have this optimized solution that's automated deployment. You can have it up and running really in minutes, and you've got a full end-to-end backup solution that's super easy to manage, whether you're a backup admin or infra admin. Definitely embrace the one-click capability there. So with that, I'm going to hand it over the next slide to Ryan. So Ryan, you want to take a deep dive into kind of the architecture of Mine with Veeam?
Yeah, sure, be happy to, Matt. And just to, before jumping into the architecture, wanted to definitely echo some of the things that you had mentioned there. Certainly from the Veeam perspective, some of the feedback that we've heard from our customers, coming into Nutanix Mine with Veeam was, I love the simplicity of Veeam. I love the ability to be able to just deploy it. We have a saying that goes, it just works when it comes to, deploying, launching Veeam, and actually starting and configuring your data protection for, your data center. And with Nutanix Mine with Veeam, we really wanted to take it that next step. Customers love the ability to quickly deploy and run Veeam, but they are looking for something more than that. They're looking for that proper pairing. I know I can run Veeam anywhere, but do you have any recommendations? Or do you have something that's been tried and true that I can roll out in a very quick fashion? And immediately our vision and our conversations went towards Nutanix, who have really shaken up and really pioneered in a way the hyperconverged industry as we know it, and the setup and the deployment experience all focused on that customer simplicity. Matt mentioned, just again, that focus on hyper focus on the customer and customer obsession in terms of customer experience. So, we saw it as a natural pairing and the ability to leverage sort of the strengths of the two companies, the highly available and scalable platform that Nutanix has put together with the universality of Veeam, being able to protect whether it's Nutanix in your primary, your standard 3-tier architecture with compute, virtualization, and networking in different places, perhaps physical workloads, perhaps different hypervisors. You get the nice thing about Nutanix Mine with Veeam, and this is really pointing to the center of the screen here, is you receive the full-fledged, fully entitled version of Veeam Backup and Replication, that industry standard for over 12 years, which means anything and everything that you could protect from a Veeam perspective is supported on Nutanix Mine with Veeam. But where we really see the power of this is fitting into a comprehensive information lifecycle management story as told by Nutanix. So being able to leverage Nutanix for your primary data center infrastructure, running Nutanix Mine with Veeam as your secondary storage and data protection solution, and then being able to interface with, as Matt mentioned, anything from the cloud to, again, what Veeam supports, things like tape, but even something like Nutanix Objects, their own objects implementation, which I would add includes support for immutability. We talk about data security and compliance. We think about business continuity. Back to the video, that ability to have immutable object storage is critical in today's world where ransomware and other threats just continue to evolve and mature. And being able to manage that entire life cycle of your data across one UI, Prism, it really makes the experience easy, consistent, and repeatable, which is, especially when we think about data protection, there are those times where, something's going to happen and you're going to have to call in or cancel your plans for the weekend going camping. We are doing our best to try and prevent that from being the case with Nutanix Mine with Veeam. We want to make sure that there is some assuredness, that backup confidence in your data protection strategy. So with that, I think we're going to move it over to the Q&A. I want to make sure that we left ample time for that. And so I don't know if we'll be reading the questions or if David, you'll be helping us with that, but would love to hear if there's anything coming out from the audience.
Absolutely, yeah. We got a lot of great questions for you coming in. While we do that, I'm just going to bring up a poll for everyone out there that asks a simple question: what additional information would you like about the Nutanix Veeam solution? So we got a lot of good questions coming in. Matt, Ryan, you ready for some Q&A?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I've been trying to handle some of the ones that have come in chat, but I only got to, I think, 3 of them. So go for it.
No worries. Yeah, I'll read them out here. So let's see. First one I wanted to ask you is just about, can I use my existing Veeam licenses with Nutanix Mine with Veeam? How does that work?
Great question. Yep. So I can take that, and Ryan, feel free to add anything additional that I'm missing. But so the short answer is yes. If you have existing Veeam licenses, you can absolutely use that with Nutanix Mine with Veeam. There is a potential requirement to convert the licenses. So actually, and that I will hand it over to you, Ryan, because you're more across the licensing model as it pertains to Mine with Veeam.
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. So I guess the short answer is yes, and then I'll put the asterisk behind that and say that as I had mentioned, Veeam Backup and Replication is what's running on Nutanix Mine with Veeam. And so if you've taken advantage of our Veeam Universal Licensing model, which provides that flexibility, being able to license and protect in terms of workloads, not specific hypervisors or specific types of applications. It's one workload applies to a virtual machine the same way that it would apply to a physical device. If you have those Veeam Universal licenses, then it's as simple as just deploying Nutanix Mine with Veeam and applying that license key to the Veeam deployment that's on Nutanix Mine with Veeam. If you are coming from a perpetual or a socket-based licensing model, we do have some conversion paths to get you to that point where you can leverage the universal licensing model. And that's something that, certainly I would encourage you to engage with your Veeam salesperson in order to understand, what steps those are.
Got it. Okay. And then what about, there's a question here, what hypervisors does this tool back up?
Yeah, it's a
Absolutely.
great question, and I can probably grab that one as well. So, given that we are leveraging VBR, Veeam Backup Replication, we do have support for the major hypervisors out there. So AHV with our AHV backup proxy. We have support for ESX as well as Hyper-V Microsoft.
Nice. A lot of flexibility there. And then what about hardware? What hardware platforms does mine support with Veeam?
Good question. So yeah, I can take that one. Yeah, so essentially all of the OEM partnerships that Nutanix supports, Nutanix Mine with Veeam supports. So, by default, obviously there's Nutanix NX, so that we have, that's our kind of default backup solution. But in addition to that, we also fully support HPE, Lenovo solutions, I believe Fujitsu we've recently added, and then we are able to support Dell XC as well, as long as it's sold with XC Core, which, it's a bit of a nuance, but, definitely speak to your Nutanix account team, if you're interested in the Dell offering. But long story short, any OEM solution that Nutanix can run on, Nutanix Mine with Veeam can run on.
Excellent. And then there's a question here, Julio is asking about support. If someone needs support with this, who should they call, Nutanix or Veeam? Or?
Good question. Yeah, I can take that as well. So yeah, we have a cooperative support agreement in place. So the short answer is you can call either. And if you call Nutanix support and our support engineers get in there, they'll obviously do their best to remedy the issue or identify root cause. If it seems to be a deeper Veeam issue, they can on the back end engage Veeam support. So no need to open a separate case. There's no ping pong. There's that cooperative support agreement in place, so we can actually address it all with one support case. And vice versa, right? So if you are more comfortable calling Veeam support for your Mine appliance, you can absolutely do that. And likewise, if it seems to be a Nutanix issue or require a little bit more deeper investigation on the Nutanix side, the Veeam support organization can engage our support engineers.
Perfect. And then I like this question. How does Nutanix Mine optimize backup performance?
Great question. So yeah, we'll probably hand it over to Ryan here because I'm sure he has much to add, but I can certainly speak for the Nutanix side. We leverage obviously kind of inbuilt Nutanix storage performance optimization, right? So we use things like LCM and tiering to tier workloads. So as we do ingest of backup workloads, we automatically put that in our op log and SSD tiers to offer kind of the fastest storage for that ingest. Using the op log, fortunately, because we're doing backup workloads, a lot of this should be serialized, but for any random IO, we can kind of coalesce that in our op log and then drop that into SSD. And then as it cools off, we can tier that down to lesser expensive spinning disk storage. And then further up the stack, we actually leverage Nutanix volume groups to do this. So at the virtualization layer, it's actually the same architecture that Nutanix uses for business critical workloads like Oracle or SQL or Exchange. We leverage multiple vDisks and leverage the true capability of scale out. So by leveraging multiple volumes in one volume group that we present to Veeam using XFS, essentially we're helping scale and parallelize a lot of that I/O at the Nutanix layer. And then I'll let Ryan talk a little bit more about XFS and fast clone technology.
Yeah, absolutely, Matt. And I think you hit the nail on the head on that one. And so that XFS technology allows us to leverage the block cloning functionality that we introduced in V10 and added some enhancements to in our V11 version of Veeam Backup and Replication. And that really just optimizes the write between the different repository locations on the system. And then that's just sort of inherent to the Veeam product set. One thing I will say more on the solution level is that, part of this solution, we've referenced the setup experience. We have something called Foundation for Mine. If you're familiar with Nutanix's, deployment model, they have something called Foundation to actually IP and set up and license the system and, get the cluster up and running. Foundation for Mine was modeled, from the same perspective in terms of usability. You'll find the interface and the walkthrough is very, very much, of a similar manner. And with that too, we are doing some of the tuning on the back end. So, Matt had mentioned the configuration and stitching of the volume groups together, being able to present that to a scale-up backup repository on the Veeam side, for those familiar. But really, there's additional configuration parameters and optimizations that we're able to apply in terms of, configuration tweaks because we have, discrete knowledge of the underlying hardware platform. And that's one of the things that, again, tying this together in a hardware and software stack really helps us or gives us the benefit of providing that optimization from that angle too.
Excellent. Well, thank you for clarifying that. Really good answers. We have a lot more questions there still in the queue. We don't have time for here in our live Q&A. I'm afraid we're out of time, but Matt and Ryan, it's been great having you on. Thanks for your presentation.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Hey, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
And for more information on the Veeam and Nutanix joint product, Veeam Backup with Nutanix Mine, check out the URL that's there in your Handouts tab. That'll take you to Nutanix.com, and you can learn more about the Nutanix Mine with Veeam solution. And of course, we do appreciate all your questions. I'll be routing these over to Matt and Ryan for them to respond to. All right. Thanks, everyone who responded to the poll as well. I'll leave that up while I announce our next set of prize winners. We have another Amazon $500 gift card. This is going out to Paul Cody from Illinois. Congratulations, Paul Cody from Illinois. And our next grand prize for another Apple M1 MacBook Air. This is going to Scott Kelsey from California. Scott Kelsey from California. Congratulations to both of you. I'll post the prize winners in the questions panel as well. We've got 3 more gift cards, 2 more MacBook M1 Airs to give out, so make sure you stay tuned for that. All right, let's keep the Megacast moving here. I'm excited now to introduce you to our next presenter. Welcome, Mr. Peter Elliman, Director of Product Marketing at Druva. Peter, are you there?
I am here, yes. Thank you for the introduction, short introduction. So anyway, yeah, thanks a lot. And I thought I'm going to talk about really just how you can future-proof your backup and DR strategy with cloud. If you're not already thinking about how cloud can help you do this, hopefully I might give you some ideas as to why and really the value of doing it, because it's in our view, obviously, it's the direction that everyone's going. And look, if you think about it, you're probably already seeing a lot of the changes that are here on this slide, in your business today. There's changes in both, business and application models, right? So from the business model perspective, right, your data has already left the building. I mean, and it's spread across hybrid cloud environments, endpoints, and edge devices, right? So you have this data that's in more locations, actually, not fewer. And then not only that, like the applications that you're trying to protect are no longer monolithic, but instead are made up of, smaller elements, containers, microservices, things like that. And if they're, again, not quite there yet, they probably are moving that direction. And so, the gap ultimately that's beginning to open up for many organizations is really, how to protect this data and what architecture to use, in order to sort of avoid the silos that you end up having across your data center, your cloud workloads, your SaaS applications, and even your endpoints. And so, again, no surprise, a recent ESG survey indicated that 40% of enterprise applications, are running on some type of cloud infrastructure today, and that's growing even more, up to 58% in the next 28 months. And really probably, that rate of acceleration has been increased, due to the COVID and other types of situations that have impacted all of us really around the world. So cloud really can meet the needs of the business today. I think again, if you've been doing backup for a while, there might be sometimes some suspicion as to, wow, can I really have all my backup data in the cloud? And with this new model, with where you're seeing data go and applications go, the answer is absolutely. One of the reasons, though, businesses like that is It helps them address TCO, that total cost of ownership, because you're only paying for what you use when you use it. And so you eliminate this idea of sort of the stranded capacity and compute, the idea that you buy all this compute and capacity to sort of handle something over the next 3 years that may or may not work. It allows you to scale faster. So as your business is changing, as you need to protect things in different applications, new applications or changing application infrastructures, you don't have to go out and sort of buy, install, and kind of re-architect things. Because again, you can have a cloud-centered data protection that's protecting both on-premise and cloud workloads. And so it gives you agility because you're removing many of the infrastructure management components and simplifying self-service capabilities. And then SaaS gives you the best of really both worlds, which is local and global. So in other words, you can have a globally accessible backup solution or architecture, but keep the data local. So you can keep the data in the regions where you need to ensure that either you can meet recovery requirements or you're meeting your data sovereignty locality issues. And the Druva Cloud platform is really designed for just this, right? It's designed to not only address data protection challenges that customers have, but data governance needs, and then to provide really a higher level of cyber resilience. And to do this really across all the places that data lives, right? Edge locations, the data center, and of course, cloud. And by cloud, right, we can mean your traditional applications like SQL or Oracle on EC2 or any cloud hypervisor, as well as SaaS applications, right? That's increasingly teams around the world are realizing, okay, I need to protect that Microsoft 365 instance. So, but why SaaS data protection for the data center? I'm going to focus a bit more on this. And a big reason is that the old ways of managing backup and DR are feeling cumbersome and are changing. And you know, the first reason certainly is cost. There's just a lot of duplicate data out there, and customers are challenged essentially managing all the pieces and the cost associated with that's really driven by data growth. The other challenge is, of course, infrequent recovery validation. So again, it can become difficult for customers to test and validate that recovery is going to work, whether it's in the data center or even at the DR site. And then lastly, as businesses expand or have more locations, applications in different locations, there's essentially more pieces and more complexity, and that ultimately is opening up risks to things like security risk that could be from ransomware. So a classic example where that happens is in remote offices, remote or branch offices. And so, you know, how is SaaS cloud backup sort of changing that? Well, on the cost perspective, it's reducing the number of data copies or silos that you have because you are really putting the data up into the cloud. You're eliminating duplicate hardware, and we've seen reductions of total cost of ownership reductions for customers by up to 50% or even more. Again, because you're removing a lot of that infrastructure management, the duplicate infrastructure, and some of the cost associated with that. The recovery piece is addressed really because you can test recovery both on cloud and on the premises more frequently, and you can turn it on and off when you want. So you don't need to have, for example, for DR, you don't need to have a lot of standby DR equipment to test your ability to failover capabilities. And then the last one around sort of the complexity is, again, you can, with SaaS, you can define policies, and then you let essentially the SaaS application manage all of the rest. And again, when you move data into the cloud with a cloud native application, that data is going to be more secure because it's going to be isolated from your network. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in depth. So I want to just quickly walk through, like, all right, if you look at the traditional infrastructure, most customers have something like this in their environment, which is you've got your production servers, your backup software, and then you've got some sort of how am I moving that data offsite. So you might be sending it to tapes, or you might be sort of replicating it off to another location, but you're doing something to get it off to an extra site. And in some instances, you might even be pushing that data up to the cloud. And so, but all of that, even whether you're going to tapes, whether you're replicating or you're going off-site, you've essentially got those, you're following the 3-2-1 rule, you're, putting that data on different media, and you're moving it off-site. Now, cloud can solve a lot of the challenges you have along this path. One, because you're removing a lot of the scale limitations that you normally had with local software and hardware. So traditionally, one of the reasons that backups fail is, frankly, just a lack of storage capacity. You didn't have enough storage, or something wasn't allocated properly. That's one of the number one reasons for failed things. Other reasons can be, obviously, potentially lack of throughput, or you just weren't able to. That's related to the architecture of your environment. The duplicate data is solved really through deduplication. So the question is, are you getting that global deduplication across all your sites? And again, how are you managing deduplication? Let's say if you're replicating between different sites, or moving off to tape. These are all places where you're going to have that storage flow. So that's number two. The other element is when you put that data up in the cloud, the other question is you can take advantage of long-term retention. So that allows you to better utilize, again, your overall storage piece. And then lastly, you have one bill. So if you're putting data off to tape or moving data to replication, and then you decide to add, well, maybe we should start to push some of this data up to the cloud, you're going to be responsible for managing that cloud storage. And typically, that's going to have additional cost or management. So while cloud may have been a convenient way to get rid of tape, or possibly not to manage things at another site, you're managing that cloud storage, the administration of that, and the security of that. So SaaS really offers a way to solve the scale issues, solve the storage optimization issues, and to reduce a lot of the complexity you have across that environment. So why Druva? Because you may not have heard of Druva today and what we do, but we're running over 1 billion plus backups per year in our sort of global platform. We've got over a large number of customers worldwide, a footprint that's growing. We've had significant growth in adoption of our services as customers move to our cloud platform. And we're available in over 14 plus global regions. So we'll run in AWS, but obviously we back up data from both data centers and clouds, across the globe. And then our NPS. So our Net Promoter Score differentiates us in terms of us having one of the highest NPS scores in the industry. So customers absolutely love not only the platform, but the experience that they have. So more specifically, Druva unifies data protection by eliminating cost and complexity. So let's talk about more specifically how we're doing that. So on the left-hand side, you see the workloads we protect. So we can streamline your data protection for those workloads by providing on-demand scale and self-service capability. In other words, to add, expand, or decrease a given workload. And the workloads you see on the left aren't really relegated just to a data center. These workloads move to the cloud frequently. So doesn't matter where it's running. Again, as I mentioned earlier, if it's running on EC2 or on a hypervisor in Azure. The second element and where Druva can solve challenges is, of course, on new workloads. So customers are adopting new platforms, whether they're using starting to adopt Kubernetes or running cloud-native applications, building new cloud-native applications in AWS, or realizing that they've got a SaaS stack of applications that need better protection, better recovery capabilities, and often sort of e-discovery often drives a lot of the SaaS app protection needs. And so, the ability to sort of protect those new workloads at the same time that you're protecting a lot of the traditional things that you've been protecting, adds a lot of value. Third really is that you no longer need to maintain a secondary site for DR, or certainly you're able to reduce or consolidate what you've been running in that location. So having the data in the cloud gives you a lot of flexibility as to how you can perform DR. And so, Druva has a DR as a service capability that helps you to fail over your VMware workloads into your AWS VPC. It's automated, secure, and fast, and can help you meet RTOs of minutes. And then fourthly, obviously, is the TCO. So because you're really just paying as you use infrastructure and services in it with Druva for the data center type workloads that you have there, or whether they're running in a data center or cloud, it's all really based just on one metric, which is the amount of dedupe storage you consume. So it's very, very simplistic in the sense that you just have a single metric. The other area is on long-term retention. I'll go into a little more depth on that, but that drives a lot of what customers do because they need to hold on to the backup data. Sometimes it's kept as a system of record, if you will. And so you want to keep that data. Often you might have NAS-related data that you need to keep for a long period of time for compliance purposes. So that being able to control or reduce costs there can be a big driver in solving some challenges. So I wanted to actually go a bit more deep on the long-term retention because often I think what folks are doing is today the easy button is just I'm going to push what I'm doing on-prem to the cloud, and that solves my challenges. Because the cloud certainly offers the durability that you may want or need, and can give you that access that maybe you may not have had you been using, say, tapes. And of course, you can leverage lower cost cloud storage tiers. You can go to a sort of a cold storage option when it goes to the cloud. But the real challenge that sort of catches up to you is, the increase in the storage management that you're really having to manage. Frankly, you're introducing a whole nother management layer, and you may even be running some level of software storage in that cloud. So depending on the software solution you use today, when you write it to the cloud, the question is how are you going to optimize the storage in the cloud? How are you going to make sure that those backup copies you're storing in the cloud are deduped? And if they're deduped in the cloud, is that dedupe sort of reliable? And what do you need to do to manage that? And so that's ultimately that challenge is you've got this dedupe data, you want to store it efficiently for a long period of time, but how do you manage that in the cloud? So you've got an increase in storage management. You are potentially, not getting the storage savings you want because of how you're archiving it to the cloud. So maybe you're even getting sort of duplicate storage. And then the question is just, what does recovery look like when you need to pull back that data? In other words, how reliably can you pull it back? What can you search for? What level of granularity do you have when you're pulling it back? Druva really changes a lot of that because, again, we eliminate that idea of on-prem and cloud storage management. So you don't need to manage any other type of storage in the cloud. We're doing that for you. And by sending that data direct to cloud, we're also managing that storage in the most efficient way possible because we have a built-in deduplication system in the cloud. It deduplicates globally across your workloads, and we enable storage tiering. So we can archive, when we put it to lower cost storage, we're also only moving the change blocks into that storage. So you're getting essentially the storage optimization you want as it goes to cold storage. The other element that comes up is we offer what we call direct to cold backups for compliance purposes. So again, for unstructured data, many customers have some data that they know they just want to back it up into cold storage and not really touch it for whatever time frame they have. It could be 5, 10, 30, or even more years. And so by never touching warm storage, by sending it direct to cold storage, we can offer up to 50% lower cost for that. So it's a nice option to have because you can maintain it in your backup catalog, but have it there in the cold storage. And then simplifying recovery, and just a common interface you can search for and recover data regardless of the storage tier it's on. So what I wanted to chat on is just, all right, well then, based on where you are, how do you drive impact and change? And the first I'd say is, mindset obviously is important. If SaaS data protection is more than a technology difference, the goal is not really to sort of battle out about any given feature, but more an operational mind shift, the desire to sort of move away from some of the traditional challenges. And so maybe it's not like, maybe you're not ready to sweep the floor, if you will, with what you have, but you very well have specific workload challenges. And so the idea is focus on that workload challenges and ask yourself how your current product versus potentially a new product like what Druva has, or we're not that new, we've been in the market for over 8 to 10 years, can solve that. And so file data and long-term retention is one area. AWS workloads or cloud workloads, and this could be file-related, SQL Server, Oracle in the cloud, VMware. So a large number of customers are moving to VMware Cloud, and then DR as a service. So replacing tape or disk to disk. So thinking about how you can solve some of these particular challenges or these new workloads that are coming up, the cloud really can offer an option and allow you to move more quickly. Again, sometimes these projects are based on existing ones or new ones, right? So it could be VMware Cloud as a new project you're moving towards, or again, you might have a migration that's going on in place for an app or database. And often, right, as part of that migration process, you're not going to move all your SQL or Oracle databases to the cloud all at once. You're going to start with the lower tier ones and then move forward. So again, the question is how are you going to be able to manage the two of those in parallel? And the last piece is remote branch offices, and how to simplify what you're doing there. Two quick case studies. I'm not going to go in detail on these, but they're great sort of testimonies to the value we had. The University of and you can find an online case link and some videos around these. But the University of Manchester had a VMware Cloud initiative, and we're looking to move over. They'd been on Veeam and another on-premise solution, and it was cost prohibitive to do that. Right? And so by switching to Druva, they drove significant cost reductions, 50% plus, storage reductions, and more importantly, it allowed that team to sort of move other applications to the cloud more quickly. CATS is another story I love. They had multiple solutions in place, like many customers do. They had Veritas, Dell EMC, and Veeam all in the environment. And really, for them, again, with all those different solutions, it was performance issues and cost challenges. And they adopted the Druva Cloud Platform really to change how they were protecting and to improve their DR capabilities. They moved 52 plus workloads to AWS in 3 months. So significantly, accelerating really their transition to the cloud and a significant improvement in IT productivity. They were spending 50% less time on managing their backups. So a lot of benefit for them. So what I hope you'll consider, I know we're right up on the end of the line, so we may not have time for too many questions, but we'll see what comes in, is, go find your savings at Druva has an online TCO calculator. It's only about 5 steps. Get a demo. So click there. We're always happy to do demos. We do custom demos regular demos every Tuesday, and then start a trial. So we'd love to get you on a trial. We don't, we just like to talk to you and understand your needs before we set you up on a trial. But essentially, it is a free trial, assuming you're a real customer and not just parking your home videos there. All right, thanks a lot.
Great presentation, Peter. Really appreciate that. We do have some questions for you out here. I'm going to go ahead and move to our poll question. I want to call everyone's attention to the poll that's on the screen. What additional information would you like about the Druva solution? And I'll leave that up while we take your questions. So let's see, first question that came in, they're asking about the, we'll just get this out of the way, the licensing model for Druva, and what if there is a disaster and they have to perform a recovery? Is there an additional cost for that, or how does that work?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, Druva is pretty simple. It's just based on your licensing is based on your back-end storage consumed after dedupe. So other than that, you can use it for any workload you want. So as for DR, there is an additional charge for DR, depending on, we have essentially business, enterprise, and elite levels for our licensing. So DR can be licensed on a per VM basis, or you can get unlimited. And what makes our DR unique is really our ability to offer this fast and efficient failover of VMs without the need for a secondary site. And so we can meet RTOs in minutes. It's basically approximately 30 minutes, and your typical RPOs, recovery point objectives, would be about an hour. But it's an orchestrated failover. We have pre-built pre-flight testing, essentially, to make sure that failover works. And really, you can test it whenever you want. Like, we don't charge you for it. So failover occurs in your own VPC.
Excellent. And then there's another question here. Does Druva, how do you protect the data that's stored in Druva's cloud?
Right. So Druva's, when you back up to the Druva cloud, it's secured, data transmissions. When you back it up to the cloud, it's secured with TLS. The data written into the cloud is encrypted, as you might expect, with AES 256-bit. It uses envelope encryption, which means Druva can never see or access your data. And then more importantly, really, only the Druva cloud can access that data today. So your data is not only isolated from your network, but there's really no way for anyone to access it. So you're getting that air gap protection, and that's what's protecting your backup application from ransomware.
Excellent.
Or both the application and the data, I should say.
Got it. Okay. And then what about scalability? How scalable is the solution? Nathan is asking.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, because we run in the cloud, it's ultimately infinite scale. In the back end, we can keep if you need, for example, local copies in the data center because of bandwidth or RPO related challenges. We have a local cache that you can install. It's a software appliance you can put there. But ultimately, we have an infinite scale. That's the great thing. You don't need to worry about it. It's just based on your ability to push data to the cloud.
Excellent. Another question here. They're asking about egress charges. How does that work?
Yeah. No, there's no ingress or egress charges when you're backing up from a data center to the Druva cloud or remote office or anything like that. There's no ingress or egress, so there's no charges for recovery.
Awesome. Let's see. What they're asking, can I meet my RPO or RTO requirements with the Druva cloud? What are the possibilities there?
Right. So, I mean, if you're certainly people like to create what I call the fear, uncertainty, and doubt, like, I can't really get it there. But really, we bring a number of technologies to help you meet your RPO, RTOs. So as I mentioned, we use global source-based dedupe and forever incremental technologies to make it highly efficient for you to get the data into the cloud. And really, once you get over that first full backup, it's not a problem. And we help customers seed data if they need to in multiple ways. We integrate with Snowball, and there's lots of things we can do. We do offer, as I mentioned, a local, we call cloud cache. So if you need it, sometimes it's used in remote offices or sometimes in data centers. It provides benefits like bandwidth throttling and scheduling and other things. So you can run backups when you need, and then sort of use the bandwidth to push them to the cloud at another time when you need it. The great thing is, again, Cloud Cache, it's a no-charge software appliance. So you deploy it when you need it, where you need it, and we don't mind. The definitive answer is yes. We number of case studies where customers find really that the Druva Cloud is actually outperforming what they have on premise.
Excellent. All right. Well, it looks like that's all the time we have in our Q&A. But if folks want to get started with Druva, I've just brought up the next step slide here. It's got these hyperlinks. If folks click on them, you can do that. Just mouse over the URL right there, and if you click, it'll launch that to start a demo or start a trial or find out your savings with the calculator. Peter, if they go for the trial, what's the time to get that set up?
It doesn't take long, but what I would say today is, again, we do typically do a call back to you, right? The difference right now with the trial from Druva is with other on-premises, you use your own software and storage when you run the trial, whereas when you run it in the cloud, we're essentially paying for the server and the compute storage to do that. So we're happy to give you a free trial and give you the 30 days that you need to run it and use it, but we're going to ask a little bit about who you are and make sure you just might possibly have a real project, but it doesn't take long to do it. You click and someone will call you back. We're happy to have you try or walk you through certain use cases. But as I mentioned, it's not set up like, hey, I can just totally run it touch free. We get it. You don't want to be hounded by fails, so we try to do our best on that point as well.
Excellent. Yeah, it makes total sense. All right. Sounds easy. Sounds like a great solution that could help a lot of companies out there. Again, great presentation, Peter. Thanks for being on the event today.
Thank you.
For more information on Druva, of course, visit druva.com. There's the demo. There's the trial link right there. And in the handouts tab, you'll find a resource as well on building an innovative cloud disaster recovery plan. So make sure that you check that one out. All right, and with that, it's time for another Amazon $500 gift card announcement. We have a gift card going out to Brad Stewart from Texas. Congratulations, Brad Stewart from Texas. 2 more Amazon $500 gift cards and 2 more Mac M1 MacBook Airs to give out on the event today, so make sure you stay tuned for that. And with that, it's my pleasure now to introduce Mr. Craig Tiriak, Vice President of Product Management at Scale Computing. Craig, are you there?
I am. Dave, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Great to have you on. Take it away.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you having me on today. Yeah, so I had planned to kind of give a high-level overview of who Scale is quickly and talk about our HC3 product, which is our flagship HCI product, and spend some time talking about HCI in general. But based on some of the other vendors that you have on here, I don't think I necessarily have to go into a ton of detail about that. So instead, I want to spend the majority of my time actually doing the demonstration of the product, assuming I can get screen share working correctly. Real quick, though, let me tell you who Scale Computing is. So we were founded in 2008, and back in 2012 is when we first launched that flagship product called HC3 that I was referring to. And really, since then, we've amassed thousands of customers in enterprise, really distributed enterprise, more than data center at the enterprise, small and mid-market companies. And I mean, you name the industry, we're really kind of across. It's really anywhere that there is a need for simplicity in the infrastructure. So that typically is the case anytime you have limited to no IT resources on premises. And so that's where we've seen a lot of success. This is the part that I thought, well, I'll just tell you what hyperconvergence is. And I think based on some of the other vendors you've had on here and just how long hyperconvergence has been around in the space, I think most people understand that this is kind of that combination of compute, storage, and virtualization layers into an appliance form factor. I want to kind of harken back to a few years ago, back when this was a very common deployment methodology, and just talk about the pros and cons of it, and then introduce HC3 as kind of the next version of how this should work and the data protection functionality you get along with that. So in this deployment model, this is what we like to call a 3-2-1 model. It's actually still fairly common when people are migrating onto HC3. They're often coming from a solution that looks like this, where you're taking a handful of host servers and you're loading either VMware or Hyper-V or some sort of hypervisor on top of those. You're connecting them down in through redundant switching into either a SAN or a NAS. So using iSCSI or NFS. And as you can probably tell just by the layout of this slide, it's fairly complex. There's a lot of layers to it. There's a lot of understanding that you have to have expertise internally or through kind of a managed service provider to be able to come in, set this up, and manage it effectively over time. With that complexity, though, comes some positive things. I mean, the biggest benefit to architecting something like this means that, if, say, that first host in this environment were to fail, because you have shared storage, because you have protection at that storage layer, you can fail over the virtual machines from that node into one of the other hosts in the system and still, kind of maintain that highest available uptime that you possibly can for the environment. But again, at the cost of all the complexity that comes along with it. So along comes hyperconvergence, along comes our HC3 product, and we've done some radical things to simplify that stack in such a way that it looks as if that the storage on those nodes are directly attached to the virtual machines running on them, meaning that you don't have to mess around with iSCSI or NFS anymore. So with that as the setup, let me tell you about HC3, and then I'll just dive straight into a demo. We'll spend the majority of the time there. HC3 really is all about four things. It's all about simplicity, high availability, scalability, and then affordability. And again, we're targeting really distributed enterprise where you've got hundreds of maybe thousands of sites where each site needs just autonomy, essentially, because you don't have anybody on premises to run that infrastructure, or small and mid-market companies where you have IT generalists that are in charge of the entire infrastructure and don't necessarily need or want to have the skill set of every individual layer in that stack that we just covered. So with that, let me go to one more slide here. So these are some of the topics I'm going to be talking about today in this demonstration. We're going to walk through the snapshot functionality, high availability. We're going to talk about replication and how that works to either a local target or a remote target, or possibly even to our HC3 Cloud Unities, the DRaaS as a service offering that we have. Let me share my screen though. And Dave, I'll just verify, are you able to see this okay?
Yes, sir. Looks good.
Fantastic. Thank you. So what you're seeing on screen is a 3-node HC3 cluster. And this happens to be an HE150, which is at the lowest end of our product line. These are really small form factors, great for a remote office, branch office, or a retail environment, or maybe the S of the SMB. Oftentimes we'll see this sold through managed service providers to those smaller clients that they have. It's while you're looking at this as an HE150, it wouldn't matter if it's an HC1000 or an HC5000. The entire product line shares this same interface. And so let me talk you through that. Ahead of the call here, I've taken these nodes and I've put them, they happen to be in a rack. I've plugged in power, I've plugged in networking, I've assigned an IP address to each of these nodes. And then the first step you take is to initialize a cluster. And what that does is it aggregates the storage of all of these nodes together so that it acts as kind of a unified resource pool to be able to start creating virtual machines. So the first thing I really want to talk about with being able to protect the data in your environment is just local high availability, which is fairly common at this point, but the simplicity of the HC3 solution I think is fairly uncommon. So here I'm going to create a new virtual machine called ATM. I'll give it a tag, which is just a logical grouping here so I can kind of keep all my virtual machines here together. Oftentimes we'll see Windows and Linux variants, but to be perfectly honest, really anything that's x86 based is going to virtualize and run just fine on HC3. And we do include performance drivers for Windows and Linux and what you see here. It's a matter of just selecting how many CPUs do I need, how much memory do I need, what's my drive size. So if this is a Windows VM, this would be my C drive. Of course, I can add additional data drives, and all of this is thinly provisioned. And then the last step is just selecting what ISO do I want to use to boot from, and then click Create. And so, just like that, in a matter of really just a minute here, I've created a machine. I've been turning it on. It's automatically highly available. I haven't had to deal with any of the complexity of a traditional environment to make that happen. And the intelligence of the system is going to place this virtual machine on one of the nodes in the system. Looks like it's placed it here on node 1. And if node 1 were to fail right now, whether it's a drive failure, node failure, we'll be able to handle and tolerate that failure. So if it is a node failure, what happens is automatically, without you as the administrator having to log in, these virtual machines that are sitting here would just restart on the other nodes in the system. All that's handled seamlessly. Of course, because we are sharing the storage across all the nodes in the system, and for those of you who want to get into the details of it, we're striping and mirroring across every drive, every disk, in every node in the system, which means that when that's pulled together, I can do things like live migrate these workloads from one node to another without having to worry about impacting any users that are logging into those workloads at that time. Now, of course, what's nice about that is we can make use of it for things like rolling upgrades as well. So, when you talk about data protection, it's really all about trying to maintain the highest possible uptime for your workloads. Some of that is planned, a lot of that is unplanned. And the majority of what we're talking about today is unplanned, but the planned downtimes are also impactful if you can't fit them in the right hours. So things like having rolling upgrades to be able to apply updates to the BIOS, to the firmware, to the storage stack, the hypervisor. When it's tested kind of as a unit, the way we have with HC3, you can apply that and not have to worry about it being run even oftentimes during the workday, right? So that way this works is you apply the update here. I actually have one showing here in the UI. I click on that. I apply the update. It's going to start with the first node in the system, make use of that live migration functionality to move it to another node, upgrade all those items that I just mentioned in the stack, and then when that node is back up and nominal again, it will migrate those workloads back to it and then just rinse and repeat all the way through. So I think that's a fairly good understanding of what HC3 is in general, and the basis of which is that high availability. But there are additional things that you can do in here, such as snapshots. So snapshots are this is one of the more unique things I would say about how HC3 operates. The snapshots that you can create on HC3 are effectively run as what's called allocate on write, which means that there's very minimal impact at the time of actually taking a snapshot. It's metadata based and not actually creating a full copy of this snapshot. There's also, because of the flexibility of how we've created this, really you can create hundreds of snapshots without impacting the performance of the VM itself, and do things like clone them off at that point in time. Now, I think I mentioned that we include performance drivers with the system. We also include a guest agent, which you can use to kind of coordinate quiescing a VM as well. So these are all crash-consistent snapshots by default, but if you have that guest agent coordinating that quiescence of a specific application, you have an application-consistent snapshot that you can restore to as well. So just in simple terms, what that means is here I've taken just 2 manual snapshots on the system. If I want to go back to one of these in time and clone from it, I just click the clone button. I can give it a new name, give it a new description, kind of apply what I'd like to on that, and then click clone. In the background here, it's creating a new VM. Now, while these are all collected together and displayed as kind of as part of this ATM virtual machine that I've just created, there really is no link between them that I need to necessarily worry about. So if a particular snapshot needs to be deleted, that's not a big deal. You can kind of keep as many as you want and handle them however you want with that. And these clones that you're creating are automatically bootable. So I can go ahead and spin this up. I can put it on a separate network if I want to do that. I can disconnect the network entirely, but it's fully writable at the time of cloning it up. Now, while that was a manual snapshot, you don't necessarily want to sit around your entire day waiting around to take manual snapshots of your data to make sure that they are available to clone from. You really want to automate that as much as possible. And so having the ability to set up schedules and have more of a policy-driven snapshot schedule really becomes critical for operating in today's IT environment. And what this allows you to do, in fact, I'll kind of pull up a recurrence rule. You can set really as granular as you'd like. Typically, we'll see people go down to as many as 15 minutes for that lowest end recurrence rule, all the way up to monthly of how often do I want to take this snapshot. And then maybe even more important than that is how long do I actually want to keep it around. So being able to define both the recurrence rule as well as the retention schedule for that snapshot is critical. And notice that there's an extra option here, which is set different for a remote retention. This is all about replication. You don't always necessarily want or need to keep the same snapshots locally as you have remotely. And so we offer a lot of flexibility here to be able to say, maybe you only want the most recent snapshot on your local device, or maybe you want, hundreds of snapshots on your local cluster, but you only want the most recent one at the remote site. We give you that flexibility to be able to define that retention here. And then once you've saved that, you can apply it to, whatever virtual machine you want on that policy, and then it will respect whatever that schedule has been defined as. For replication, it's just one step further, which is, where do I want to replicate this to? So here I've actually already set up a replication target, this PM Indy HQ. If I hit replicate to it, it will take a snapshot. It will reach out, and here this another cluster that I'll log into, and you'll see here's the snapshot being generated on that remote site. So it took a snapshot. It looked out at this site to say, does this exist? If it does not exist, then I want to go ahead and create a snapshot and send it over the wire. And of course, it's going to compress that and send it in an encrypted way, such that I will be able to restore on this side in the exact same manner that I just showed you locally, which is to clone off from that virtual machine. Now, I have already replicated a virtual machine here that I can use to clone from. I can either clone directly from this list, or I can just click the clone button here, and all of a sudden I've failed over from my primary site to this DR site. We see people do this all the time because it's so easy to accomplish. It allows you really to test as often as you need to feel confidence in the solution. Again, having the ability to either disconnect or maybe put this virtual NIC on a different VLAN to be able to come up in this remote environment. It's just a matter of powering it off and on, and you're off and running. And what's cool though is that restoring that back to the primary site is pretty seamless. In fact, all you would have to do for that is to set up replication back from this VM that I've just cloned off here. So let's say that I actually had a disaster and I absolutely needed to fail over all my critical virtual machines to this secondary site. I can spin them up, I can run them there as long as I absolutely need to, and then when I'm ready to fail back, I just set up a replication schedule back to that primary site and hit replicate. And it's going to do the same thing. It'll take a snapshot. It will look at this primary site and say, does this snapshot exist? Now, here's where that lineage comes in. While you can delete any of the prior snapshots without any impact to that running VM or kind of all the clones that are based around that, it is able to identify and say, what is the latest snapshot that I have in common between these two sites? Now only send over the differential between that last snapshot and the one that I just created here at the secondary site. So instead of reseeding an entire virtual machine back to this primary site, you're now just worried about the changed blocks that have happened since your prior snapshot or since you failed over. A couple more intricate things that we have here. Actually, first, this is unplanned, but I'll go ahead and show you. Some of the intelligence that's built into the system here is that we are monitoring thousands of conditions on every node in the cluster. One of the things we're monitoring is, are you running so many virtual machines that you're not able to actually tolerate failover? I mean, how great is that? In an environment where you're worried about data protection, you want to make sure these workloads are up and running. You want to make sure you can get them back up and running in the case of a disaster or human error or ransomware. Having something tell you, hey, you're in a situation right now where if you had a node failure, you would not be able to tolerate that node failure. That's what's built into HC3. So that's actually what the warnings are here on screen, letting you know that. And that's sent out via syslog as well as email, and of course here in the user interface. What I was actually going to show next, though, is some of the more advanced functionality here. So here I've got a Windows VM here. It's pretty basic. I can't remember if it's 2000. Yeah. I think it may be a 2019 version that I'm running here. I do have a guest agent in here, so it's passing through things like the mount points, my C drive, my F drive. Those snapshots that I keep referring back to, if you actually go into the details of these, we do list things like those mount points, right? So let's say you had a user that deleted a file and you needed to restore that file for them. If you have an idea of when that may have happened, you can go back to the snapshot where it was involved in, and you can either mount that virtual disk at that point in time to that running VM, or maybe even any other virtual machine that you have running in the system. Here, if I just mount this locally, in that Windows VM, you'll see a new volume that you can bring online, pull that file off, delete that that virtual disk that you've just added on there, and kind of off and running. So here, if I go back to this this VM, you'll see that I now have, here's a new drive that has not been brought online, doesn't have a volume yet. Going into this Windows VM, I can go into disk management and should see this new volume here that I can bring online. I can find that file, I can restore that file, and then kind of do with it what you want to. But it is fully writable, readable, being mounted that way. There's a lot of other cool things you can do with that functionality that's just built into HC3. So I think that's, on the demo side, that's really everything I wanted to cover. But let me go back to our screen share here. Everything I've talked about really is what I would call our HC3 data protection suite. And as you could probably see from the demonstration, there's a lot to it. And a lot of different things, knobs that you can turn to dial it into your specific requirements around your RPOs, your RTOs, whether you want that to be replicated locally or whether you want that to be replicated to a remote site, or potentially even to our DRaaS as a service offering, which is kind of a cool, interesting thing as well, which is that we have virtualized a node and we use that as a replication target sitting on top of Google. So the GCE is where that's typically run. With all that said, there are still situations where you might want to have a third-party backup product like Acronis. We have integrated with Acronis to be able to allow for agentless backup of HC3 VMs. And really where you're going to want something like this is if you're in an industry that has regulations that require really, really long-term data retention, this could be really useful. Or, I showed off that file level recovery. Maybe, you want something beyond that with object level recovery for databases or maybe email servers, that sort of thing. Acronis is really great at those things. Those snapshots that I talked about can protect against ransomware, and I actually have got some interesting stories around that with customers that have been hit with ransomware and just kind of reverted back to a prior snapshot and they're off and running. But if you want real-time ransomware protection, Acronis shines in this space. And of course, there are other use cases of where that might come in handy. And we've actually developed a product that we call our business resiliency system that takes these Acronis licensing and packages them together to allow you to use that as a local on-premises backup target and then still be able to spin up your HC3 VMs on top of that target as a kind of restore point from Acronis. I will say, in all the things that you might read out there about scale computing and HC3, what you'll see as a thread throughout is that our customers absolutely love the product. And they do because it does exactly what we say it does. You can probably see in the demonstration today, it's all about transparency with us. I wanted to show you the product and exactly how it worked. And I can say that I've never read a review that said the first DR product to actually make me smile. I've never heard DR making anybody smile, but I'm happy to say that one of our customers actually said this out in the wild, so I grabbed the quote. There are thousands of reviews out there. I do welcome people to go to those reviews and talk to your peers and understand how they're using HC3 and why it is that they're giving us 5-star reviews. We kind of run the gamut from the small end of the HE150 that I just demonstrated from all the way up to really high end to very high capacity kind of core data center style of deployment. So really from edge to core all the way to cloud when you include our HC3 Cloud Unity offering. And Dave, that was really everything I had prepared to talk about today. Have there been any questions that I can answer, though?
Absolutely, Craig. We do have some questions for you from the audience. While we do that, we're going to bring up our poll as we always do at the end of each session, and I want to call everyone's attention to that. What additional information would you like about the scale computing solution? So let's see, Craig, as you said, your customers love you. Scott was commenting here in the questions pane that they're a scale computing user and they absolutely love the product. He said, I can personally testify that clone, replication, etc. is as easy as it looks. It was a huge selling point for us. Also, a lot of great feedback, of course, on your demo. So thank you for taking time to share that with us. Let's see, first question I see I want to ask you is about they're asking, can I use an existing third-party backup product to back up an HC3 cluster?
Yeah, I probably should have covered that. Absolutely. In fact, many of the people that have demonstrated or talked today on your call can work with HC3. If it's agent-based, there's no doubt it will work. You basically just load the agent up and continue using it exactly how you have. It's really when it comes down to agentless where you would need to use either Acronis or the built-in replication functionality that offers agentless backups with HC3 today.
Got it. Okay. Question here, can I run Linux and Kubernetes in an HC3 cluster?
That is a great question. Yeah, in fact, I wish I had demonstrated from that cluster. I've got K2RS running in my lab here locally, and we've got a lot of interest in that. And it's, based on where we have targeted our focus as a company, I will say in small and mid-sized companies, people are starting to dabble, but there's no real trend to pick that up quite yet that I've seen. Where we see more of that is in the edge computing space or distributed enterprise, where people are trying to roll out, on-premises kind of DevOps style of deployments of their applications on premises. And yeah, that's commonly used on top of Linux VMs on top of HC3.
Nice. Let's see. David is asking what automation options are available for scale computing.
If I hadn't known that these were coming from the audience, I would have guessed somebody at Scale was seeding these, honestly. So there are a ton. There are, well, first of all, let me say that there's a fully documented REST API that is becoming more and more commonly used. Even things like, one of the things I didn't really talk about here was just exporting virtual machines, right? So if you want to make use of, if you've got a standard NAS that already still has some life left to it and you wanted to make use of that, you could just use the export functionality built into HC3 to just export your full copies of VMs onto this device. We see customers that are making use of the REST API to orchestrate that type of thing, even through just like a PowerShell script to kind of call hey, I'm going to export, here's my target, and here's how often I want to do it. And then they have additional scripting that says, here's how often I want to delete those snapshots or exported copies of the VMs to maintain whatever archival story they need to tell internally.
Excellent. Nice. Brent says that he thinks affordability for this solution would be critical. Would love to hear you talk a little bit more in detail about how affordable is HC3.
Yeah, you probably saw on my one slide in there where it's like, here are the 4 things we always talk about. It used to be 3 things. We used to talk about high availability, scalability, and simplicity, with simplicity being the key to it all. But, I'm in the product management space. We talk to customers after every win and every loss that we have. We try to reach out to understand why. And I will say, more often than not, when we are talking to a customer, affordability comes up as one of the reasons they have gone with us, at least to start. Now, once they're on us, they love us for all the other functionality that I just showed off. But it's a matter of, does it do what I need it to, and then can I afford it? And affordability is absolutely key. Actually, surprisingly, I did not include the slide that has pricing on it in that edge to core to cloud, which is usually one of the things we do because it's, again, it kind of goes back to that transparency I was talking about. We don't try to shy away from what those prices are, and it can be anything from, like at that low end with the HE150, sometimes those can be as low as $5,000 per node or less. And then you start going up into the upper end, and you can get into some pretty competitive pricing even at the upper end of our HC5000 line.
Nice. And then what are the options for backing up data to the cloud?
That is a good question. So I kind of breeze through talking about HC3 Cloud Unity, which again is more of a DR as a service offering, but some people do use it somewhat for that backup use case, just get their data off site. But more often than not, so I mentioned exporting just to a local SMB share. We have some customers that will use cloud gateways and kind of back up to AWS or Azure through that cloud gateway, which is kind of interesting. It's in fact, I think I heard one of your prior speakers talk about having a local cache. That's effectively what that cloud gateway is. It kind of acts as a local cache, and then in the background we'll tier off the longer term archival backup VMs or snapshots to the cloud. And then I'll go back to our Synchronous partnership. Through Synchronous, you can use almost all the major cloud providers. I think I've even seen Wasabi listed in there as an option to be able to back up through that.
Nice. Yeah, a lot of flexibility there.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Craig. It's been really cool having you on. Great demo again. I'm afraid we're out of time here on our Q&A. There's some more technical questions for you there in the queue. But thanks so much for being here.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Dave.
For more information on scale computing, check out the handout that's there in your audience console. It is the Guerrilla Guide to Delivering Turnkey IT Systems. It's a complete free ebook right there, 44 pages. Make sure you download that and check it out after the event. And of course, check out scalecomputing.com as well. I'll leave up the poll while I announce our next set of winners. We have another Amazon $500 gift card. This one's going out to Theodore Candela from Washington, D.C. Theodore Candela. And our next grand prize for an Apple M1 MacBook Air is going to Ben Saavedra. Ben Saavedra from Kansas. Congratulations. Still got one more gift card and one more M1 MacBook Air to give out on the event. So stay tuned, and of course, stay tuned for another awesome presentation. And now I'm excited to introduce you to our next presenter. Welcome, Mr. Adam Margett, Technical Specialist at Unitrends. Adam, it's great to have you.
David, good afternoon. Thank you so much. Congratulations to our prize winners. Some really cool prizes on that event. You love to see that.
Absolutely, yeah. Great to have you, Adam. Take it away.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Well, good afternoon, everyone. As we're kind of moving towards the tail end of our event, really appreciate the opportunity to speak to everyone and share a little bit about what we've been up to here at Unitrends with regards to enhancing data protection, disaster recovery, and DR capabilities. As David had mentioned, my name is Adam Margett. I'm a member of the technical marketing team here at Unitrends. And a quick look at our agenda, I think that it's important to kind of level set and talk about some of the different approaches that we're taking to data protection, often informed through conversations that we've had with our customers and kind of adapting to a really rapid changing marketplace. We'll certainly introduce Unitrends for folks that are unfamiliar and share a little bit about our platform that we call Unified BCDR, but ultimately I think that it starts with the fact that our reality has changed. You know, we're facilitating operations through technology, but we're working with a number of different users with different levels of technical literacy and proficiency. They're connecting in via all sorts of different devices. Their situations for connectivity are going to vary from user to user, and IT, depending on your organization, you might be supporting 10 to thousands of users, and they've got tremendous uptime demands. For the education sector, classes have to be scheduled, testing has to be conducted. In the corporate world, payroll has to get out on time. We have to be able to host our web services and continue to process and book orders. And in order to do so, we've seen an emergence of new applications. SaaS applications and cloud-based workloads have added to that complexity, and as demands for uptime are rising, we haven't necessarily seen a correlation or a correlating growth in the resources that IT is being given to meet these goals. And we really feel that expertise can't be assumed. Ultimately, it's kind of this age-old challenge that IT pros that we hear from are being asked to do more with a lot less. And when it comes to some of those challenges, especially specifically for backup, a lot about what we're hearing is how backup is fragmented and it's under attack, where there's been a huge uptick depending on the researchers that you come across. The threat of phishing is up 400 to 600%. A large minority of those, about 25% of those phishing attacks, contain more malicious payloads such as ransomware, and we've seen behavior in these malware variants where they're attempting to disable Windows services, delete backups. They're stealing publicly published APIs to do so autonomously, and ultimately there's not a lot of automation today. There are a lot of manual aspects. There are certainly some things that you can automate, your scheduling out, your testing, but to make sure that these solutions for all these different platforms are working, going through all these different screens and hopping into different products, we're seeing it consume people's days, a quarter of your day, maybe more depending on your environment, and that can be a significant expense, not just in the time that you are spending managing the solution that's being taken away from more strategic initiatives, but as well, being locked into that singular licensing approach where you're with a vendor or with a solution that's primarily focused on protecting on-premise infrastructure. Maybe it's your bare metal servers or virtual machines, but that same technology may not have the flexibility to protect those cloud-based workloads. So it's kind of moving and having that flexibility to adapt your approach that we're really innovating into. Unitrends has been in the data protection and DR space for about 30 years, but really accelerating our growth was our merger with Kaseya. And since we've merged with Kaseya, the platform that we're building, this unified BCDR platform, is aimed to break down a lot of those silos, not just for the backup and DR use case, but across several different functions. So it's the unification and that purposeful integration from backup and DR to compliance, documentation, security, remote monitoring, and management that really is streamlining and bringing that automation into the infrastructure for our customers. We've got a complete solution stack from the technology that you deploy locally in your data center, protection for cloud-based workloads, SaaS data, and on the back end, infrastructure to support it. The pinpoints on the map here represent the cloud data centers that we operate at Unitrends worldwide. So we've got a number of regions where we've built out dedicated infrastructure that's solely been designed to offer our customers long-term data retention, off-site recovery, and our disaster recovery as a service. So it's that unification in the stack in that when you have an issue, regardless of whether it's hardware, software, cloud, or DR related, you're reaching out to the same support organization, entirely US-based. So you don't have that finger pointing where, that's definitely a software issue, says the hardware vendor, and back and forth. You're not going to find that with Unitrends. We're taking ownership for that entire stack. When it comes to the platform that we have built, it starts with your ability to protect all of these different workloads, where we've got approaches, again, to protect those traditional data center workloads as well as cloud-native workloads, SaaS applications, and even the data that's being produced on endpoints, those remote workers that maybe aren't always the best at connecting into the VPN, or they're not coming in on site to easily take backups and protect that IP. But in addition to your traditional backup and recovery processes, we've started to implement automation around the aims of data loss prevention, detection for anomalies in backup data sets to identify the threat of ransomware, predictive analytics for threat conditions. With regards to protecting our human defense, the integration of multi-pronged phishing defense, dark web monitoring to reduce the frequency of these occurrences, empowering your frontline employees with visual cues, actionable buttons and items that they can click to quarantine or have IT investigate a suspicious email or an externally sent email before they go to click a link or an attachment. Ultimately, we recognize that things do go wrong, and we'll talk about some of the different ways in which you can recover, how and really where you need it, that DIY reset button, if you will, for your business. But as we start to layer in some of that automation, the ability to automate out DR testing, validating down to the application services level to ensure that recoveries are working. This is great for both simple and complex environments, whether you're testing recovery for a handful of VMs or you need to orchestrate the testing of more complex end-tiered applications. The intelligent alerting engine for the platform is really built to cut through that noise. And just as an example, if you're disabling a backup schedule for a SQL database, you're applying an update, you disable the backup schedule, and you forget to turn it on. We recognize things come up. There are a lot of interruptions and distractions. A couple of days go by after that update, and the appliance notices that, hey, it hasn't received a backup or it hasn't taken a backup of this database. It's going to prioritize that alert. Hey, Adam, we had previously been protecting a database on this schedule. Did you mean to keep that turned off? So we want to bring the most important information to the top of the funnel for you and proactively start to build more infrastructure or more automation into the infrastructure use case as well. We're doing this today. It's called Helix. And essentially, Helix is a SaaS platform that's powered by our technology. And what it's doing is looking for issues in the production environment that would impede backups, VSS services that are in a failed state, inadequate space to mount a VMDK before you go in to take a snapshot. Little things that rather than coming in to a barrage of failures and alerts from your appliance, you come in on a Monday morning to an email from Helix detailing remediation that was taken to ensure that you had a successful backup of your Exchange server, for example. And we've brought all of this into a single platform and provided us with a single pane of glass view to be able to manage it all, what we call our UniView. More specifically, the approaches that we have built to backup and DR start with our hybrid cloud appliances. There's flexibility in how you can deploy these. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But they're our core engine, and it's powering not just your backup and recovery processes for more than 250 versions of applications, operating systems, and hypervisors, but it's also performing a lot of those supplemental tasks. You're scheduling out your data retention, your replication, post-backup processing such as deduplication, compression, and encryption. So you're not bringing in additional proxies. You don't need to stand up a secondary database. It's all being powered by that core appliance, turnkey and ready to go. You simply rack it, stack it, and give it an IP. To complement that, we have through our sister company spanning cloud-to-cloud backup for SaaS workloads aimed at protecting your Microsoft 365, your Google Workspace, and your Salesforce.com, giving you a little bit more control and helping to fill in some of those gaps along that shared model of responsibility. And the last piece has been some of our existing technology that we've hardened for the additional use case to support more reliable backup over the WAN, direct from your machine back up to the Unitrends cloud. Great for that edge data, roaming devices, work from home employees, even some more basic file server data. You install a lightweight agent. It's been hardened to reliably perform WAN backups, and those are replicated and land on a target that's being managed by the Unitrends team in one of our cloud data centers. The hybrid cloud approach, when we talk about deploying our solution, there's flexibility again in how you can deploy either a turnkey physical appliance that's based on a capacity basis, or a virtual appliance that can be deployed on any of your favorite hypervisors, whether it's VMware ESXi, Hyper-V, Citrix Zen, or Nutanix AHV. You install that virtual appliance, and then again, you can protect all of your physical and virtual systems. We've got agents to perform file-based backups, image-level backups, host-level snapshots, more granular application protection for your storage, as well as your infrastructure as a service workloads. Now, locally, we'll be retaining backups on the appliance where they're immediately available for recovery. You could carve out and build replicas of mission-critical Windows assets or virtual machines. You can use things like instant recovery for very fast recovery of bare metal assets or virtualized assets. But it's still important that we have strategies to get that data off-site, especially when we think about the threat that exists out there and the way that networks are under attack today. One of those key elements of defense is creating an air gap. So you can replicate data, backup copies to an alternate location, another storage device, or even better, removable media, something like hard drive or tapes that are going to be physically disconnected from the network. So you take your backup locally, you run our automated testing to validate the backup is a good backup. It's been certified. You then replicate that off, move the media off-site to create that air gap. The disadvantage, while this is great for that function of disconnecting it from the production network, is that recovery efforts, your RTO is going to be a little bit longer here. You have to retrieve that media, you have to re-import it, rehydrate it before you can restore it. So to power those more aggressive RTOs, we would also support replication over the WAN to a disaster recovery site. And again, we can build this out and really customize it based on your organization and your needs. You could replicate to an alternate appliance where with our fan-out replication, you can pick and choose. You're not limited to replicating from hardware to hardware. You can mix and match. If the primary site is full of resources, you need to deploy software there, but you've got a branch site that's a single server, you might want some additional resources should you need to recover, deploy a physical appliance at that site. You can replicate from hardware to software, software to software, mix and match as you need. You could deploy our virtual appliance from public cloud marketplaces. We support deployment into AWS or Microsoft Azure, where you could replicate backups where they're stored on a public cloud target, an appliance that's living there, and keeping the backups in a warm state where they're immediately available for recovery. The other option, as we had mentioned, is replicating to the Unitrends cloud, in which you can enroll those key workloads or mission-critical machines into our disaster recovery as a service, where that recovery effort, that big lift, is being performed by our cloud cores team. So you make a phone call or a declaration of disaster, we start to spin up those workloads, and we help you start to reroute that user traffic so that you can maintain productivity. Earlier this year, we saw a large number of declarations with some of the storms that struck the northeast, or the north, kind of that south central region. I don't know why I'm in the north here. That south central region in Texas, with some of the storms that were striking in the Midwest last year, with a lot of the heavy flooding in Arkansas, the tornadoes in the Tennessee area. We had a lot of declarations to spin up workloads in our cloud-based service while local sites were unavailable. We've also taken steps to harden our solution from threats such as ransomware, where we've seen an increased number of attacks over the last year, getting more targeted and getting very crafty, building in gestation periods or periods of dormancy where they're not immediately detonating that payload. They're starting to extract data, and that data exfiltration is occurring in about 50% of all cases. The first step comes in prevention of these attacks and the hardening of the backup appliance and our OS kernel. Unitrends appliances run on a hardened CentOS kernel, which, in addition to being targeted less frequently than Windows, about 83% of all attacks are targeting Windows-based functions or Windows file extensions, you also have that hierarchical permissions model of the Linux architecture. So it makes it very, very difficult when following best practices for a threat actor to gain the level of root access that's required to encrypt or write changes to the backup repository. An additional layer of protection would be replication to immutable media such as tape that's physically disconnected, tape or disk, or replication to the Unitrends cloud, where once the backups are written to that cloud target, they are immutable. There are no write permissions once they've been landed, so no changes are being enacted against the data that's stored in the Unitrends cloud. On the front end, we've armed our appliances with predictive analytics, a machine learning algorithm that, as we start to take backups and understand the pattern of behavior for the assets across your network that we are protecting, we establish baseline patterns of kind of that heartbeat of the machine. So when we're measuring these heuristics and we see anomalies against things such as rates of change or the overall entropy or the randomness of the data, it's going to trigger an alert through our UI dashboards, our email notifications, so that you can proactively investigate the root causes of those anomalies. If it is deemed that there is infection, you can leverage a recovery assurance tested backup and identifying those clean points of restore. The alerts also will include timestamps, so you can go back and look through that certified history of backups to identify where that clean point of restore is. The recovery assurance piece is entirely automated. Once you set up the job, you can drill down and set up the testing to be as simple or as complex as you like. In the screenshots here, and I saw the gentleman earlier using the screen share. I'm going to have to do that on our next event. I thought that was really cool. But we've pulled some screenshots from our appliance where, as you're setting up this job, you can reconfigure the machines, define different service profiles to test upon spin up, adjust the CPU, the memory, the networking of these machines as you're spinning them up in an isolated testing environment. But once the machines are booted, we're going to drill in and execute CAN strips against the application services level to validate those machines. For example, your Active Directory service at NTDS, verifying the status of a particular SQL instance. We might want to test something like IIS publishing for web hosts or web servers. So you can map through and orchestrate out what recovery needs to look like for those machines, execute those tests so that you understand and have that confidence that the backups that we're going to be recovering are fully functional. In addition to validating application performance, you can write your own custom scripting as well through Batch or PowerShell. You're also going to be able to track recovery point and recovery time objectives to ensure that the most recent backups that we are testing are compliant with those objectives. Now, in addition to the recovery assurance piece, which gives you that confidence locally, when replicating to the Unitrends cloud and enrolling machines in our disaster recovery as a service, we're using that recovery assurance to validate the backups that we're receiving in the cloud as well. So in kind of looking through what that process would look like is we're protecting the local site with Unitrends, and right now user traffic is being routed to the local site. We've replicated and seeded all of that data in the environment in the Unitrends cloud where the backups are stored in a warm state available for recovery. When disaster strikes the local site, you make that declaration via phone call or authorized personnel calls Unitrends, and we will spin up an IPsec tunnel so that we can securely start to reroute that user traffic as we spin up those workloads and bring them live in the DR sites. Now your users are rerouted, they're performing, they've got access to their applications and the services that they need with minimal interruption, and we're starting to take backups while you're running production out of the Unitrends cloud. When the local site has been rebuilt and you're getting ready to fail back, we're going to reseed an appliance with the most recent copies of data that we have in the cloud and overnight that to you. Usually that's going to be faster depending on the amount of data. If we can transfer it over the WAN, we can do that as well. But in some cases, for larger data sets, we're going to seed a new appliance and overnight that to you so that you can start to begin that local import and that local rebuild of the environment. And at this point, you're still running production out of the Unitrends cloud. When you're ready to switch back, you've re-imported that data, we're going to tear down any last Delta changes and put those onto a device so that we can import those locally to the appliance. You report that local import from that media, typically a NAS device, and we'll perform one last final sync. So we're going to restore those last systems, start to bring them online, reroute that user traffic to resume production out of the local site, and then we are going to send a new prep kit to capture any changes for a future failover event or a future declaration. So now with all of these approaches, again, we've got a single view, a single UniView platform, which is a global dashboard for all of the three modules, the hybrid cloud appliances, the SaaS backup, and the direct-to-cloud backup. Now, UniView is going to kind of globalize and prioritize those alerts, going to give you the global health of the backup environment, the assets you're protecting, any failures or warnings that have occurred, and you can easily drill down from that central portal into the individual interfaces to manage those machines with, or those solutions with more granularity. So ultimately, what we're driving for when we think about, some of those problems that we talked about earlier, how do you go from that fragmented kind of piecemeal environment to being more complete and unified? And for us, it starts with being able to protect data in all of those different locations, but it's not just for us, the backup side of things. As we start to expand into that human protection, defense against account takeover attacks, that anti-phishing protection, being able to do all of that in one place with a single user through SSO and one call to support it all, we feel that that's a big piece of the simplicity of being complete. It's not going to mean that we're shoehorning O365 data and you've got to download that down onto an on-premise appliance. That approach might not be right for data that's in the cloud. For us, it's all about leveraging that approach that's right for your data, your environment, and to meet your recovery objectives. There's still some things to come here, but we feel that we've made a lot of headway in getting there. With regards to automation, and we talked a little bit about the recovery assurance testing, Helix, which runs entirely autonomously, the way in which these threat actors and these attack groups are going after environments, they're counting on backups to fail, or they want backups to fail, and there are aspects of the production environment that are out of control of any backup vendor, but by being able to bring more of that automation of infrastructure components into the backup use case, we saw it as a big gap that we're aiming to fill in a way in which we're starting to differentiate. We talked about Helix. It's running from the cloud. There's no management, no UI, but it's always out there looking for problems in the environment that would impact backups and solves them without any intervention. It's still pretty new, but we're seeing from a lot of the customers that have already deployed Helix thousands of fixes per week. We're really excited about being able to build in more automation and more use cases on top of some of the things that our customers already love, like that recovery assurance, automated DR testing. And thinking about how things are priced right, I couldn't quote you what Unitrends is going to cost. I'll leave that to our sales department, but it's not always about just that initial price tag, but is the model flexible and is it predictable? We talk to a ton of users about cloud, for example, and there's a lot of unpredictability in the cloud and with regards to what you're going to pay depending on how it's going to be implemented, what region, how many instances, when do we appropriately throttle, and that's where we're taking a BCDR approach that's more specific around your data size. When we talk about licensing capacity in the Unitrends cloud, we're looking at that on-premise footprint, not what's going to be accumulated after that data has been retained for 3, 5, 7 years, so forth. And that's one thing that's going to help, but as your needs start to shift from on-prem data moving into the cloud or into SaaS applications, we've got the ability to future-proof that with some of the other approaches that we've taken to protecting that data. There's a lot more to come here. We're still working on some things on that regard, but we're very, very excited about the prospects there. I'm going to turn things over to David for any Q&A that's come in, but I would highly encourage folks, if you're interested in learning more, to visit us at unitrends.com. We've got a number of different free resources, some great cloud cost calculators, free maturity assessments for BCDR, trials of our software, appliances, even free versions that you can take advantage of. We've got our handout in the handouts section, the Unitrends New Rules of Recovery, that's going to talk a little bit more about some of the issues that I've outlined here. So I would encourage you to check that out as well. And if there's any assistance or any information that we can give you, send us a note, visit the website even, shoot us an email, info@unitrends.com, and we'll help get you pointed in the right direction. So I'll leave this up here just so folks can grab the URLs, and I'll turn things back over to David here for any questions that have come in.
Absolutely. Yeah, great presentation, Adam, as always. Tons of information in a very short amount of time. Really enjoyed that. We had a lot of good feedback as well on your presentation there. In fact, I saw here a comment that I liked from Brett, who said that Unitrends saved us when we had a SAN crash. Always great to hear that. Customers who use the products and really see the benefits out of them. And even better to save the day like that. So great info. I'm going to bring up the poll question for everyone out there in the audience. Just as what additional information would you like about the Unitrends solution? And of course, we appreciate your feedback on that poll there in the slides window. First question comes from Jan, who's asking, is UniView available today, or is it in beta? What's the status of it?
So UniView is live and available today. If you're currently using Unitrends, you can start to, or you can get set up with the UniView module. So absolutely, we are live with the UniView. We've got customers that are using it today. I apologize that I wasn't prepared for a demo. Otherwise, we could kind of show you and drill down, but you can absolutely take advantage of that today.
Very cool. Yeah, I look forward to seeing that next time myself. Let's see, Alan said we use Unitrends now and they saved us on a file server crash. So great to hear that. David, there's a question from David here about ransomware. Have you seen use cases where, or examples of how Unitrends has saved customers in the event of a ransomware infection?
So we actually have, if you go to unitrends.com, right on our homepage, there is a quick little 90-second video from one of our customers. They're a manufacturing organization based in Ohio, here in the United States, that kind of details, and I had the opportunity to sit and chat with the IT manager, Chris Rolk, firsthand. And the long story short was, he was using Unitrends to protect his environment, ARC files, engineering files, Oracle data, and he was doing a test. So he was reloading data from a test environment on a Friday and found that, he's having a migraine, so he goes home. And when he logs back on a little bit later, he sleeps it off and he comes back in and he's having issues getting remote access into the plant. So he tries a couple of different ways to get in. And he finally manages to kind of get in through a back door, and he realizes that everything's running slow. Things were coming up, but nothing was working right. So he starts to investigate, and it's kind of that dawning moment, like, oh my goodness. He realized what was happening. They had been hit by a ransomware attack. When they shifted to remote work, they had employees that were connecting in through VPN, and one of those passwords got compromised. So he's out the door at 2:30 in the morning. He runs into the plant, and he starts just yanking cables out of the wall. And ultimately, once he gets everything to kind of stop running and they're ready to restore, the Unitrends box was unaffected. So he starts to wipe the environment clean, and then he goes to performing those restores, Oracle data, engineering files, and he's starting to bring that all back up. So it's a really incredible story. We've got a more in-depth case study that should be published very soon that kind of goes into it. There was another customer of ours. They were using Unitrends along with a competitor. It's kind of that redundancy, planning for no single point of failure. We can understand that. They were also hit with a ransomware attack. 400 VMs and the competitor were encrypted by ransomware. But again, the Unitrends box was not affected, so they could use that to start to rebuild. So there are some really cool stories. We've seen it out there a lot and in all different industries: education, government, manufacturing, all sorts of folks. So ransomware we recognize is a really significant threat, and we're doing what we can, kind of doing our part to help customers harden their environment from that threat.
Awesome. Yeah, I love to hear those kind of testimonies from the real world. So really great to hear. I'd love to check that out myself over at unitrends.com. Next question, Deepak is asking about how can they maintain compliance when they put their backup data into the cloud?
So with regards to the Unitrends cloud and compliance, we do operate SSAE 16 Tier 3 data centers. So we are certified for SOC 2 Type 2 compliance, and we do meet the regulations for FERPA, HIPAA, and a number of others. We've got a cloud FAQ that goes into detail, but I think that typically when it comes to our part, for a lot of the compliance standards, what customers are looking for are a couple of things: that immutability that we talked about, so that we know that the data is going to be consistent and certified, but as well as the controls, the encryption. So all data is being encrypted with an AES-256-bit encryption algorithm. It is FIPS 140-2 compliant. So between the encryption, the immutability of the cloud infrastructure, and the retention periods, we've got some flexible options for retention, whether it's 90 days, 1 to 7 years, or even beyond that 7-year mark. So between a combination of the three, we can help kind of do our part in helping organizations meet the different compliance standards that they are adhering to.
Awesome. Let's see. Another question Actually, I think you just kind of covered that. I don't know if you want to elaborate, but they're asking, what are the benefits to using Unitrends Cloud over using, for example, AWS to store their data?
So I think that there are a couple that come to mind, and there have been some questions about the regulatory compliance, and certainly if folks needed more information with regards to that, we can provide more information around that certification process. But I think that a couple of the advantages that stick out are the predictability of the pricing model. As I think I mentioned earlier, we're licensing out the data based on your initial footprint. So for an educational institution, for example, if you need to retain student records for 5 years post-graduation, you determine that, okay, we've got 500 gigs of record data that needs to be retained for 5 years. We license out based on that initial footprint, and as retention builds, that's already been accounted for. So over the cost of that retention, you've got a predictable model and a predictable price for the lifespan of that data as it's stored in the cloud. The other piece, and I think our big advantage, is that disaster recovery as a service, where our team of experts will perform the DRaaS essentially hands-free. We go through with our customers to seed the cloud environment. We prepare the firewall settings, QoS. We'll provision out public-facing IPs if you needed to host a website or an e-commerce server out of the Unitrends cloud. All of that environment is going to be seeded, prepared, and tested beforehand. So when we receive that declaration, we're spinning up and resuming those services, helping you reroute that traffic within a guaranteed SLA. We're so confident in our expertise and in our processes, we'll put our money where our mouth is, and you can license out DRaaS either based on a best effort, a 24-hour, or a 1-hour RTO SLA, and that can be applied to machines individually. So if you have a handful of mission-critical servers, you could tag in that 1 or that 24-hour SLA and have everything come up. The non-critical machines come up a little bit slower, so you can, again, customize that DRaaS and that cloud environment to meet the unique objectives of your organization and your recovery goals.
Very nice. Very nice. Question here, when it comes to ransomware, is it possible to make the backup data immutable?
So the immutability would come through the replication. We have taken steps to harden our appliances on-prem. So in some of the cases, like the Duolite story that I shared earlier with those manufacturers, Windows systems, VMware environments, Hyper-V environments were compromised where the Unitrends box was unaffected. And we've seen in some cases, customers will customize where they deploy that appliance and what sort of permissions, but we've hardened and we only are open to the production environment for the tasks that we need to perform. But the immutability, and I think that second layer of protection can be achieved through replication to media that's being disconnected and taken off-site, or replication to a cloud target so that it's off of the production network.
Excellent. All right. Well, Adam, I'm afraid we're running out of time. There's many more technical questions there still for you in the queue, but we're going to have to wrap up our live Q&A session here. It's been great having you on. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, David. It's always a pleasure, and thanks, everyone, for the great questions.
Absolutely, yeah. And I want to also remind everyone to check out the resources that Adam had here. I'll put those back up on the screen. You can visit unitrends.com to get started with the Unitrends solution, and also check out the handout that's available for download there in your audience console in the Handouts tab, the new rules of recovery, for more information on the Unitrends solution. And with that, it's time for our final prize announcement on today's Megacast. I'm excited to announce the winner of our final Amazon's $500 gift card. This is going to Shane Villafuerte from Nebraska. Congratulations, Shane Villafuerte from Nebraska. And our final Apple M1 MacBook Air is going to Andrew Yaksik from Massachusetts. Andrew Yaksik from Massachusetts. I am now posting all the prize winners there in the questions panel. Just posted. Excellent. And of course, before you go, I want to remind you, check out Actual Tech Media on all the social channels, including the 10 on Tech podcast, Twitter, LinkedIn, and our YouTube channel. And of course, if you are a potential sponsor of an upcoming event, and you'd like to sponsor and present on an EcoCast or Megacast, reach out to us at connect@actualtechmedia.com. And finally, before you go, I want to remind you to join us, of course, on an upcoming event. Next event happening is our Healthcare Health Check EcoCast on assessing IT products and services to streamline healthcare operations. This is happening next Wednesday, May the 12th, so hope to see you there. We're going to have a great lineup of presenters you see there on the screen. Of course, congratulations to all the prize winners. Thank you so much to everyone for all your excellent questions. I hope that you learned a lot on today's Megacast on enhancing data protection, DRaaS, and disaster recovery capabilities. I know that I did. We'll see you next time, and have a great day. Bye-bye.